My name is Warren McGrath. I live at 155 Windermere Ave, Unit 1708. This is a question. In looking at the budget, there's some $3.2 million in various insurance buckets. There's also in the town charter a requirement for an insurance advisory board. Did an independent and volunteer insurance advisory board review any of the recommendations or pricings or suggestions for saving money? It seems like that is just treated as a fixed ongoing expense. My concern is it shouldn't be, but it is being treated that way. Did the insurance advisory board look at it and say it was worthwhile and competitive?
Yes, they're saying yes, that they have looked at them.
Who is on the insurance advisory board?
I
And there was a competitive bidding process.
This is the second year that we're on the same insurance.
So it's just a continuation.
This one, for the town. For the Board of Education, thank you. Back to this one. For the Board of Education, they're self-insured.
Right, I understand that. But there's still $3.2 million worth of insurance charges
There is.
in the budget. And I'd be interested in seeing an explanation if one's available. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Just a point of information, make sure you speak into the microphone fairly close because we have a lot of people at home, and if you don't, they won't really hear you.
Okay, is there anybody else who's present who would like to speak during the Citizens Forum? Okay, not seeing anybody in the room. Lizzie, one last chance. Anybody online who's raised their hand? So if you're online and would like to speak, please raise your hand. All right, looks like there's nobody else who would like to address the board at this time. So therefore, we're going to move on to our next item, which is budget deliberations.
So one of the things that I had been specifically challenged to do is come up with points, where we have to work on the budget. And I have that. So if we want to start with revenues, because that's the easiest part, because if we address revenues, that's the easiest way to improve the condition of the budget without actually having to cut anything. So the first item is investment interest. Tiffany, has there been any change or any idea on your estimate? Because I know we came in, right now we're at 1.4 million, and do you have any sort of revised figure?
Tiffany Pignataro, Finance Officer. Thank you, Logan. I appreciate you bringing that up. I do not have a revised figure that I have prepared for the board. I am still confident in the figure that was proposed as part of the budget. However, I do have a memo that I've addressed to the board that I would like to share with the board, so I'm going to just ask for some help passing that out, please.
Thank you.
So just for the folks in the audience and the Board of Finance members, just note that there's a front and a back to the handout. There's a front and a back side. So just in the interest of time, obviously you'll have a moment to look at this memo, but if I may provide an overarching summary here for the board and for the residents in the room. anyone that understands investment returns understands that you can't look at them at a single point in time, right? You have to look at investment returns over a period of time. So the investment market, there's bear markets and bull markets, right? But in order to get a true understanding of the average return over a period of time on an investment portfolio, you need to look at trends over a significant amount of years to understand a reasonable estimate for the future. So what I have done is I have gone through 23 years of investment return for the town of Ellington. I have summarized that on the back side of this memo. But in short, the results of the analysis support the $300,000, my original estimate for the budget. Essentially, on average, over the last 23 years, the town of Ellington has earned $221,970. For the last 20 years, $240,402. 15 years, $230,853. 10 years, average annual return, $344,124. And for the last 5 years, the average has been $557,701. So at first glance, that 5-year annual return of $557,701 looks promising, right? Yet, we all know the market will adjust. And if the market adjusts and we increase the estimate for investment income above $300,000, we are taking on a significant amount of risk in the town of Ellington budget, right? So the question here for the board tonight is how much risk does the town want to take on the taxpayer's dime? So if the projection is too high and the market adjusts downward, financial loss will need to be made up in future budgets through an appropriation out of the reserves of the town, and will create a climb for the following budget year. Essentially, this would be posturing the town for a potential cliff in the budget and a potential hole to climb out of, both in the year that this downward turn happens and the following budget year, as I mentioned. Right, so we're trying to avoid additional significant tax increases, not only this year, but in the future. And so that's something I would just like the board to consider. And we all know what comes up must go down. And I think it would be foolish for the board to assume that investment rate of returns are going to remain where they are currently today.
Okay. Quick question, because I'm looking at these numbers here. So this investment income, this is what the actual returns were in nominal dollars?
Our currency is U.S. dollars, so that's the figures.
Well,
are
nominal
provided in
dollars,
US.
as in it's just the absolute value. It's just the
The
absolute.
source is the town of Ellington general ledger.
Okay.
So this
and,
is
yeah, and you just you average these numbers out. Is that how you got them?
this is the annual investment return for the year.
Yep.
Right.
And then,
so it's from July 1st of the stated fiscal year through June 30th.
Yep. And just coming up with your numbers that you're reporting here for the average return, average annual return, that's based on taking those numbers, adding them together, and dividing by the number of years?
Averaging, correct. It's
Okay.
an average,
Yep.
yes.
So what you took was the absolute dollars, but not the actual average percentage return, and apply that to our cash holdings. So, I mean, this isn't necessarily representative of what the actual return would be. I would expect that you would take the interest, so if it's 4%, 3.5%, whatever the average return is, and multiply that by our average cash holdings, and then that's the figure that I would expect to be a more true figure. This is just nominal dollars. This doesn't mean anything.
Well, it might not mean something to you, but it means something to me, and it
Well,
supports my
it's an average.
recommendations. So if the
It's-
board disagrees with the recommendation that I put forward, feel free to make a motion.
Well, okay, well, what we should do is, if you can go and take those numbers and get whatever the average return was, whatever the percentage rate is, and then we'll apply that to the cash that we have on hand, that's a reasonable approach, and let's see what those numbers are.
Okay, thank you.
Can
you.
you do that? I mean, can you do that?
Right, so I mean, respectively, the cash balances, so the cash is what is generating the investment income, right? So the cash balances are gonna fluctuate in the same exact pattern as the investment income. So realistically, as you look at them, those are going to move together on an average with the yield from the investment portfolio.
Okay, well, if we can get the yield, and then we can compare it to the cash that we have, what we need is the average return, and then we
So
can.
if you, right, but so if you have something that you would like to suggest, I have provided you with an analysis
Well,
that.
I'm asking you to come back to the board with, with the percentages, because that's gonna, and then we can apply that to the average cash balance, and so that we can, that's gonna be a truer figure for what the investment return's gonna be. And if, I agree with you in terms of, we can look at the 23-year, the 20-year, the 15-year, that makes perfect sense. But what we need to look at is the actual percentage rate, and take an average percentage rate, because that's what we're gonna apply against the cash balance. That's exactly what you're talking about doing. But we need to do it with the actual percentage rate, not with the nominal dollars, because the cash balance can change significantly. So this doesn't necessarily tell us what we think it does. So we need the average return, and if you could pull the average return and present that on Monday, fantastic, and let's see what the numbers come out to.
But an average return doesn't guarantee you're gonna receive that. You could get significantly less.
Except that was the
Average
whole
return-
point. That was the whole point of
Logan,
what she
please,
said here.
Logan, please let me finish my thought before you interrupt.
Finish your thought.
Average return does not guarantee future performance. It does not. So she could come back and say, oh, we had 4% or 2% or 1%. We have no idea. Rates could go down tomorrow. We have no idea.
Okay.
I think Tiffany has presented a detailed analysis, and she's given us her best estimate of what she believes is a reasonable expectation.
Okay. Well, I'm literally just looking at what this says is that you have to take the average annual return, and that's where you take the interest rate, because you can have good years, you can have bad years. So you look at the average interest rate, and then you apply that to the cash balance. In terms of what the actual return will be, it could be all over the place. But what matters is, and it's exactly what she said, it can go up, it can go down. That's why you look at the average. And that's what we need, is the actual average, the percentage rate average. That's you're not going to look at a 10-year or 20-year trend on investment return, and say, okay, there we go. No, you're going to take the interest rate and you're going to apply it to the cash that we have, the average cash balance. And and then that's going to be your return. No, you're not expecting, and we'll get the figure, and then we could put a slightly conservative estimate on it. But we're looking at the average return, and we also see what the immediate term performance is, so we get a sense of the amount of risk that's in there. Because as Tiffany said, it's the question of how much risk are we willing to accept. But we need to start with good numbers. So right now, we don't have a good number because we're not taking the average return.
Well, as a point of clarification, I should state that majority, if not all, of the town's investment income is with the short-term investment fund with the state of Connecticut. We are a municipality. There are limits on what we can and cannot invest in. We do not gamble with taxpayer dollars. We can't bet the house on Tesla and let it ride.
Yeah,
we
nobody's doing
are
that.
conservative, right? So these average rates of return that we're talking about are significantly lower than what you would get in the marketplace. Right. So, and I also want to clarify that our cash balances fluctuate during the year. In July, when tax payments come in January, our cash balances are extremely high. Right. They might not be this July because if we can't get tax bills out, we don't get cash in July. So that is a moving target constantly. We also, as I've mentioned in the past to the board, we have significant amount of $75 million construction project going on that we fund and that we get reimbursed for after the fact 70%. So our cash balance this year and next year is extremely difficult to project because of the fact that we are funding all of these grants and projects and initiatives first and getting reimbursed after the fact. And the length of time it takes to get reimbursed fluctuates depending on the grant, the payer, how timely we can do reimbursement requests for those grants, et cetera. So it's not as easy of an exercise as you're making it to seem. In fact, it's quite impossible to understand given the current climate of where we are with the budget process and how soon we have our backs up against the wall for July 1st to get tax bills out. It's not as easy to predict where we are going to be in the upcoming year. And that's all I have for the board at this point in time for this subject matter. So thank
Okay.
you for your time.
Thank you, Tiffany.
Thank you. Are you going to come back on Monday with the interest rates?
I can look at what I have and I can see if I have what you're asking for. Thank you.
Okay.
I don't know if I have bank statements going back to 2002, but I will check.
Well, the state has historical stiff rates. I mean, so that's something that
You're
can.
asking for cash, I thought. No?
Well, no. No, we want the
want
percentage
cash
rate.
dollars?
We want the yield.
Yeah.
So we don't want the nominal cash dollars. What we need is the average percentage rate, the average rate of return. So, I mean, that's something we could actually just, since it's stiff numbers, we can actually just probably pull that off of the treasurer's website. So, and then we just look at, and then we'll take a look at the cash balances. I mean, and we'll make a determination, but let's see what that analysis starts with, and we'll go there. Okay, all right. Next thing, question again for Tiffany. So, what is actually our average collection rate on our taxes?
Well, we budget 98.5%.
Oh.
Well, I know that's what we budget, but
That's
I'm wondering
that's
what the
because-
actual collection rate is.
I believe, Amory, what are we, 100 point, where's Amory? 100.1, I believe, as of the end of April,
Okay.
of budget.
All right, do we know what the average is? I mean, is it typically 100%?
So in the past, we've run a little bit higher, and obviously Anne Marie could speak to specifics, but just as a general statement, we've typically run a little bit higher than our budgeted number because we have historically been provided with lower than actual cost for a budget for supplemental motor vehicles. So with our new assessor, we were able to get an accurate, updated number for supplemental motor vehicle billings, and with that, we are actually in a situation where depending on what the actual supplemental motor vehicle costs are for that portion of the billings, we will be like very tight in terms of whether or not what is collectible matches what the budget was set on, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay, and then part of the reason why you collect over is because of the supplemental.
In the
and then-
past, that is why we have far
Okay.
exceeded the
Yeah.
budget. Currently, if you notice with where we are currently, we are behind historical trends because of the fact that that number was more accurate in the current year budget that we're in, and we followed the same estimation technique and the budget that's before you this evening.
Okay. Then I guess maybe another question in terms of, well, I mean, I guess in terms of the sheer number of accounts, do we have a sense of the percentages? I'm just curious.
I'm sorry, the percentage of accounts
in terms of the
collected?
number of accounts. I mean, if we're looking at, however many tax accounts there are out there. I mean, I'm just trying to get an idea. But I mean, I guess maybe there's maybe not a room in the collection percentage for room there.
I would advise not, and the reason for that, as we all know, is the motor vehicle grand list dropped this year, right? That's the reason why overall our revenue decreased from just a pure grand list perspective, right? So we've estimated the same percentage decrease on the motor vehicle for supplementals, right? But that's a guess. So I know based on where our guess was last year versus what's actually collectible, once we've got the supples, I can say that it's a little too close for comfort. So using that same technique in this year's budget, I can stand before the board saying that the estimate that's used for supplemental motor vehicles is probably right on the money, if not, hopefully not over what is collectible.
Yep.
But again, with the decline in valuation of motor vehicles, it's a guess.
Sure.
So my advice would be no, but again, the board can do
Yeah.
with that information what
I
they
mean,
please.
yeah, it doesn't necessarily sound like there's something compelling, and we have a new methodology, so we can't really evaluate, is our collection rate good
Right.
enough yet?
And I don't mean to speak on behalf of the tax collector, but I would say we're close this year. It's like, yeah, the days of blowing the budget out of the water on collections are in the past.
Okay.
As far as,
Because we've got a better
Correct.
revenue number, basically.
correct, for
So
the
better
supple-
budgeting, so it's tighter.
correct.
Okay.
Right, and you also have to leave that allowance in there for somebody who does not pay their taxes. Like, example, the other night, we did those suspense accounts that was totaling $70,000 of ones that were unable to be found.
Mm-hmm.
Because the person had moved away, no forwarding address or anything like that.
Well, right, and that's why
So
we
we
set
always-
the 98.5%
Right.
collection.
Because you
Yep.
always have that allowance for
Correct.
ones
Yeah.
that
Yep.
you cannot collect, or person who's not paid their bill or pays late.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and this is just for everybody. The reason why I'm asking is because we've got roughly $850,000 difference between based on our collection rate and based on what the grand list is. So
Mhm.
what we send out the tax bills
Mhm.
for. So again, if we're trying to find money, to shave down, however, we don't know how tight that's going to be. So it's best to leave it alone.
It's a very logical thought, but my opinion would be that I'm comfortable, if not a little uncomfortable with how accurate we're trying to get on the estimations now. So my recommendation would be that should stay as is, because as Doug mentioned, there's always that unknown of what won't be collected, and then there's always the unknown of where the supples will actually come in.
Sure. Okay. So the supplements, yep. There is another question for you, Tiffany. Sorry. Well,
I'll just bring my chair.
no, I mean, hey, listen, we're trying to,
Sure,
we got to
sure.
shave money.
Sure, what's your question?
So do we have a projected, well, I mean, what are you estimating at year end for what we're going to have left over?
So we've done the estimate in the budget, obviously, at the 6-month mark, but we have been looking, and I think I provided the board on Tuesday with an updated financial report through the end of May. So depending on where collections come in and where expenses end, at this point, I can't tell you like an exact dollar amount right now, but I
mean,
know
a
we're planning to
ballpark.
be, I would have to run the figures to be able to tell you that information.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. I mean, can you have that for Monday?
I can make a note, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, last year, how close were we last year? What was the?
Okay. It would take me a minute to get the information, but, yeah.
Yeah, because, I mean, the obvious thought is, if we know how much we're gonna have left over at the end of the budget.
To revise estimates, yeah.
Yeah, so we could revise estimates, or, I mean, or if there's a plan for some of the departments, like, one of the things Tom did that I thought was very smart when he did his revisions, he was able to squeeze in some work
Mhm.
using the existing appropriation
Mhm.
and sort of get that done.
Mhm.
And it's like, and that came off of the next year's budget. That's something I would be very comfortable with, but it was very smart to do that. So just if we have whatever we have left over,
Yeah.
great. Or if the departments can find work that they can get done using leftovers from this year to reduce their budget next year, great. I mean, it doesn't matter to me. Do it today or do it tomorrow, I don't care. But, just so that if we, because that's a savings. Either give it back or use it and just take it off the next budget. So, anything you could do to
Mhm.
get that would be good.
Mhm.
I appreciate that. Now, in terms of projected for year end for the Board of Education for the district, do we know what's the estimate?
We'll have nothing left. We've been in a soft freeze since early 2024.
Okay, so the expectation is to have nothing left.
Yep.
Okay.
And for the Board of Ed, this is what, your 3rd or 4th year in a row of doing a freeze
This is
middle
our
of the year?
third year in a freeze.
Yeah,
Yep.
so it's every year so they're always really tight with their budget.
Okay. So the question is, are there any remaining ARPA funds that haven't been used yet?
So we've spent down all those funds. We didn't really have anything left this year. We are using some of the funds from the town to get some transportation that's needed for students within the district. But other than that, there are no ARPA funds.
Okay, no ARPA funds?
Yep.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, and just as I'm going through here. Okay, all right, so for the ARPA funds, I mean, I saw something, because I went onto the grant management system. It looked like for ESSER funds, it looked like there was something like $25,000 left over. Has that been fully spent down? Okay, and the state system just isn't caught up on it?
It might be because we haven't done a report related to that. That gets done at the end of this year. Sometimes the funds cross years, and so you won't see that reported as down until then. But yeah, we've spent that money out.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it hasn't necessarily been drawn down,
No.
but you've used it?
Yes.
Okay. All right. And in terms of the ARPA, does that include the right to read fund?
So the right to read is to fund a state mandate for curriculum with a reading program, and that we are using, but it will not cover the full cost of that program.
Okay. All right. So now, which program is that?
CKLA.
Okay.
Want to speak?
CKLA. Yep. Oh, that's the one where there's some materials and stuff.
Yeah, it's a whole new reading curriculum for the.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. So when we look at the Board of Ed budget and we see $56,000 for CKLA, the actual cost is $90,000 plus the $56,000, or is it $56,000 that's going to be covered with that grant funds?
So what you're gonna see in the budget is what's not covered by the grant funds.
The grant is
Yeah.
90,000,
Yeah.
which has been fully spent. We have not drawn down the funds yet, but it has been spent.
Okay.
So that is in addition to the 90,000.
Yes.
Okay. Where in the budget did that 90,000 show up?
It's not in the general fund budget, it's in the grants.
Okay. Well,
So
I
you
mean,
wouldn't-
just
so you
because
wouldn't-
as I
so
look
you
at
wouldn't
the
see that in what you're looking at because it's a grant funded line. But there are deliverables that are gonna be needed on a yearly basis, and we've included that in the general fund budget as the grant will not cover that.
Okay, so, but, all right, so I just want to make sure, again, that I'm understanding this, because, you know, when I look on the grant management system and I see leftover money, you know, that is obviously a concern, you know.
Oh, yeah, don't worry, we spend every penny that we
It's
can.
not
Yeah.
like where we
And,
have not.
and Logan, just for, I know you probably know this, but for people in the audience and people at home, we did not decide to do a new reading program next year because we wanted to do it.
Yeah, it's a mandate.
It's a state mandate from legislature where they gave us programs to select from, and we had to do it. It's a state law. So I just want people to understand, we didn't decide to do that in this climate. We would not have done it at all.
Yep. So, well, and I guess the question is, just in terms of the budget, I just want to understand, where in the budget are those grants being reported as revenue? Because
So
our,
they have a separate line, but they have their own offset, their grant offset, because what we do is we have to tie those out, so they're their own funds. The grants are a fund of the education fund where we show the in and out for those. Because we technically, except, like, we have special revenue, we have choice, but those are like their separate programs, so being a piece of a fund and fund accounting, we show a lot of things as funds because we don't have a profit and loss statement.
yeah. Well, no, but I'm just trying to, I just want to make sure that I understand in terms of the total revenue that comes in, because it's very difficult to piece it together, so.
So those are shown as special revenue funds, like separate trial balances outside of the general fund. So the
Okay.
general fund itself is like a trial balance, a separate trial balance. Then you have the special revenue funds that are tracked as mini programs, but essentially like mini companies, like with their own
Sure.
profit and loss. So the only education grant that we budget for in the general fund budget, which is what we're here to discuss this evening, is the ECS grant. And that's the $10 million plus that
Okay.
we have on the
Okay.
on the
All right.
state grant revenue line.
Okay, so, all right, so where does excess cost come in? Where does the excess cost grant come in? Because I know that comes into the town, and then it gets passed through to the district. So where is that recorded?
Comes to the district. So it directly offsets, it comes to the town, or to the Board of Ed, and it directly offsets the special ed tuition and transportation costs on our budget.
And we
Okay.
budget with that in mind, knowing that we're always gonna go over on those lines and that it will be offset by the funds that come in from the excess cost grant.
Okay, so the excess cost grant is not, so it's not a special fund, and, okay.
It covers overages in, in tuition, special education tuition and transportation, because those are the excess funds that we can bill for. So we budget it knowing we're gonna get that money, and then, so when those go over, the payments offset the overages.
And Logan, specifically, we traditionally budget 70% for that excess cost,
Sure.
right? The state attempted to do a tiered system for the excess cost. We're in the 80% return. A lot of districts budgeted for 80%, thinking that they were going to get it. They did not get it. They're actually reimbursing us less than 70, 69%. So actually, we're taking a loss of what we budgeted for, 70%, because usually we'll get the 71%, it'll be right around there. So it's a $13,000 to $16,000 loss of what we already have here, which we have to make up next year.
Okay, so, and again, I just want to make sure that I understand, so, because I saw in the presentation, for 24, there, you had like $904,000 for excess cost? Is that what was, that's what was on there for the superintendent's presentation for excess cost, was 904,000?
That's what we are predicting. We don't know if that's what we're gonna get back, but it is,
Okay.
we budget that, what we're gonna get back at that 70%, hoping that we do get that. This
Okay.
year, with the 69% return, we got about 862,000.
800, okay, yeah, because I'm kind of confused because I thought it was, the town of Ellington got close to 2 million in excess costs.
No, that's our special revenue. So
Okay.
that's a whole separate.
Okay, so that's the special revenue,
Yeah,
okay,
but there's an actual, like, it's a program that we call special revenue, and that's the money that, so like, say a kid is outplaced, we take that outplacement, we get tuition for having that student from the sending district, and we run what we call the sixth school, which we've talked about quite often.
Okay.
With those funds, and that's a self-sustaining program.
all right, so the excess cost is in the general fund?
Yes,
Okay, and you had expected 900,000 in excess cost, and you got 2 million,
no. So
okay?
the excess cost runs through the general fund. We
Yes.
budget, but we budget knowing that we're going to have an overage because we don't want to budget for more than we need to. And we know that the excess cost payment of, say, the 900,000 is going to cover the overages in those lines. We also have special revenue, which is a separate subset from the general fund that runs our basis and our smaller basis program, and there's kids there, there's outplacements, we have a TEPSEP program, and there's revenue that comes into that supports that program, and that gets anywhere between 2 million, a little over 2 million. And that
Okay.
runs real thin at this point.
Okay, so the basis program costs are ultimately the
In the
ones,
special
the ones
revenue.
that are in the general fund?
No,
No, okay, all right, so
Just the
when,
just the ECS is the only grant that's in the general fund.
okay,
For revenue,
for revenue, okay.
for revenue.
All right, because part of when I'm looking at the Board of Ed budget, and I see your appropriated revenue at, I don't know, 12 and change.
so
And-
that top number, that 10 million, and the VOAG, that runs through the town.
Yeah, that runs through the town.
The rest is, that's gonna be our choice program, our pre-K program, and our special revenue program, which run outside of the general fund budget.
Okay. And, well, then, my question is, all right, so that runs outside.
Yep.
So in that special revenue fund, you have, okay, so you're reporting it in the budget basically for informational purposes? I mean, that's what I'm just trying to understand, because I think, yeah, you marked down 12,425,000 for a total. Well, actually, you know what, it's right here on the, I think it's page 405. All right, so the projected budget revenues. Okay, projected budget revenues for appropriated, you have $12,425,000. And then the estimated actuals, you've got 13,437,000. So you've got a little over $1 million in unappropriated revenue. So I guess I'm asking, what happened to that $1 million?
So for next year is a projection of what we're gonna get, and it's a calculation based off the kids we know that are gonna be in those separate programs, and then a payment per kid that we get. With the special revenue, I think that's a little bit easier to estimate, right? Because we know the kids that are gonna come in. But if we were to have an outplacement, that would hurt us very much, as that can cost about $500,000 per child. But something with pre-K and open choice, those are actually on the expense side budgeted higher than what that revenue is predicted to come in. Depending on how our percentage comes in, you get extra money, and we're right on that line right now. So
Sure.
like say this year, we did get that extra money, but if we fall below that 3% of open choice students within the district, we would lose that money, and so that's something we cannot count on.
Okay. So the amount of the grant would be reduced for the open choice grants?
Yes, and
Yep.
we get paid by the student, but if you have a certain percentage in the district, you
Of the
then get-
population?
Yeah.
Yep. That's not, I mean, that's good. I mean, because I was going to talk about or ask about open choice.
Yeah.
But I did want to ask, because we budgeted for 12,400,000, or the Board of Ed budgeted for 12,425,000, and you got $1 million over. So where is that $1 million? Because that would be,
It's spent.
okay,
So any kid you take, so yes, if you take more students into that special revenue program, there's also expenses to offset that. A lot of those kids have one-to-one paras that we have to hire when any of those kids come in, and those funds are really meant to support those students. In a program like that, they can add staff like that because it's being supported by the extra revenue that's coming in for that program.
okay, so the special education revenue account, because that's where a big chunk of it. So what you're saying is there were additional costs for special education.
For the special revenue programs. So
For
like,
the-
that's the basis, the TEPSET program, the tech. Those are the programs that are on West Street, our rental properties.
Okay.
And that's what supports those programs.
Okay. And so where would we see those expenditures?
So there's a page that says like special revenue. Should be a couple pages after that. There's one for pre-K, one for open choice, and one for special revenue. And
Okay.
they all exceed the projected revenues that you see on that page.
Okay. So, all right. So the special education revenue account. So, yep, I see.
That one's
Adjusted.
real close, yeah.
Yeah, I see 1,394,000.
I wonder if, I just want to look, because I want to make sure you're looking at the special revenue, not the special education.
Special education revenue account.
Logan, why she's, I appreciate all the questions and why Alicia's looking in the budget book. I think one of the things to consider, the easiest way to explain it is, the special revenue account is an exceedingly volatile account. It is very difficult to manage on an annual basis. This is not just it's not just a set number, we set it and you're projecting things out. It is constantly going up and it's constantly going down. Overall, the fact that we actually have a special revenue account, which the Board of Finance approved for us to have, was because we demonstrated that we could keep students in district instead of outplacing them. Just to give you an example, we have 4 students that we've outplaced and 2 students that DCF has outplaced, which they do automatically, right? That's 6 total. A district like Tolland has over 30. So the fact that we're running this special revenue account is very volatile, right? We are saving the school district and the taxpayers millions and millions of dollars every single year. That's an important point to note for the people listening in and the people on the Board of Finance.
So I just want to look, because I realize that you're looking at this year, 23-24. I can pull up the actuals because, so one thing we've really been working hard on in this budget is right-sizing all the accounts and making sure that all these lines have the things that they need to in them. And that's why you see such a difference in that 23-24 adjusted and that 24-25 proposed budget, which actually is a lot more closer to what you see for that predicted revenue, with the 1.9 for the proposed budget and then actually 1.9 for the proposed revenue, because that program has been built and it does amazing things, but we're getting to that point where we are gonna outpace the revenue growth. And that's something we're keeping a close eye on.
Okay, so I guess the question would be then, can we get, I mean, so the.
And these are restricted funds, just so you know. They can
Yeah.
only be spent on these certain things.
Sure. Okay, so the 23-24, okay, so I guess, I mean, are you saying that there are more costs in 24 for special revenue, for the special education revenue account that are not on the budget here?
Yes.
Okay. Can you get us the updated figures so we could see what those actually are?
Yeah.
You know, and then I guess the question would be, so, I mean, how many of these special funds does the district have? Like the excess cost goes to one, how many?
So the excess cost goes to the general fund to offset the general fund.
Okay.
But we have open choice, pre-K, and special revenue. So, and I have those budgets in here.
Okay.
And
All
if
right,
you-
so excess cost does go to the general fund?
Yes.
All right, yep. Okay. I'm just trying to make sure, and then, but there's no line item for excess cost?
No, it just offsets the expense line because it's fund accounting, so it's the expenses that were allocated through the town, through the budget approval process, but we use that excess funds to offset the overages that we don't budget for, knowing that they're gonna be there.
Okay, so in reality, even though we're looking at, you know, the $46 million budget, the reality is that it's actually $48 million, and then, but it's netted, so it's 46.9,
Correct.
but it's actually
Yeah.
48.
As a point of clarification, the excess cost, the revenue, as I mentioned, is not budgeted, but the expenditures are net. The revenue is offset against the general fund Board of Ed operating line.
Yep.
And for audit purposes, at the end of the year, when our external auditors come in, they prepare a grossing up entry to gross up the revenue and the expenditures to actual. So that is just a reclassing entry that the auditors post to gross it up for GAAP purposes, whereas on our budget, we report it net.
Okay, yep.
So Alicia, while you're there, is the BCBA included in this account
The BCBA is in the general fund.
in general?
Yep.
fund? Okay.
Okay. I guess the question then is, again, so we have an understanding, I mean, what is budgeted for excess cost? And then, like, what is budgeted for excess cost? What is the, I guess, the not net? I mean, I'm just trying to understand how close these numbers come.
So the excess cost, we budget at 30% of the 30% of the cost, expecting that we get 70% back.
Okay.
And then if
so-
you want, you can look at, if you want to see how these funds compare, you can look at the projected revenue numbers, and then these each have total expense numbers on the bottom of each of these outside budgets.
Okay, so it's, you're expecting 70, but you budgeted 30.
Well, because we're expecting to get paid for 70 of it. So we budget 30, so anything that goes over 30, we expect that we would get a payment for that in the excess cost funds.
Ah, okay,
Yeah.
okay. All right, so that makes sense. So what's being recognized is basically 30%.
Yes.
Okay, all right. So okay. So okay. And how, I guess, how accurate has your estimates been for excess cost?
If we got the 70, very accurate. But this year we did lose, we got 69%, so we did have about a $15,000 to $20,000 loss in that.
Okay. Okay. And then ultimately, I mean, if we really wanted to compare the quality of the estimates, the way that we would do it is we would look at the audited financials and compare the excess cost or they backfill
No,
the excess cost?
we actually sit with special education and we project out the amount of students that are gonna be and what the cost would be. And then we adjust for any variances that might be had, and that's the number we use.
Yep. Oh, well, no, and I guess I just want to, in terms of the quality of that process, is if I wanted to look at that, then what I would do is I would look at the financial statements, or do the auditors basically backfill it to get the right number?
It would be tough, honestly, I think, Logan, without the financials in front of me. From memory, I would say it would probably be tough to back into that specific grant because you would have to look at the government-wide gap basis financials. And then I believe that they lump, if I'm correct, inter and intra-governmental state revenue in the revenue line. So it would be difficult to pinpoint an exact grant because they lump them into inter and intra grant revenue from what I can remember. Okay, yeah.
Okay, and that's because the excess cost grant comes to the town and then we send it over.
Right, so our budget basis, it's net, as we mentioned. We don't budget a revenue number and an expenditure number. It's just budget overages on the expenditures and offset by the offsetting revenue. But for the gap basis government-wide financials, they don't list each individual grant separately in the revenue section. They classify by revenue type and expenditure type in larger totals, obviously, for the sake of fitting everything on a page. So it might be difficult to a reader to just look at the financials and know specifically excess cost versus ECS versus any other state grant that the town or Board of Education has budgeted.
Okay. All right. Okay. Now, question on the open choice stuff, because that's sort of next. We've got we've got 752,000 last year, 24. Under projected budget revenues, open choice attendance funds has us at 744,000. Okay, but then when you're looking at you're looking at another page down, the open choice attendance grant.
Yes.
The budget summary has us at 961,000. Oh, sorry, that's for fiscal 24.
Yep.
And then it's got us at $1,020,000 for the proposed budget.
Yep.
So that represents, it's $1,020,000 in cost. That's the projected expense.
So the 744 you're seeing is a calculation of what we get per student within that program. That goes to that percentage that can go up or down, which determines whether we get that extra money. Now, if we were to retain the same students or get more, we would most likely end up with that extra money that would support the expenses that are within that grant. Now, if students were to drop, those expenses would go down and it would match what the predicted revenue is.
Okay, so I just want to make sure that I'm understanding is that, that for revenue, that represents, that's grant money, and that's the only way we're paid for the open choice?
The stuff that goes to
Is the grant?
Yep.
Okay, the grant funds. Okay, so 752,000 or 744,000. And then we've got $1 million in expenditures.
Mm-hmm.
So we basically, we're upside down about 300,000.
Yes, if we don't get those extra funds. But if we don't get those extra funds, the prediction would be that student count would be down, and if that student count was down, we wouldn't need that full $1 million to fund that program.
Okay. We wouldn't need the full $1 million. Well, I guess it's just not, so we're expecting, so you're budgeting for revenues of $750,000, but you're budgeting for expenditures of $1,020,000. However, if we realize the $1,020,000 in expenditures, then for revenue, we would actually see the $1 million.
That's the hope.
So that's,
And we always try to keep a little bit of a reserve in there in case we ever run into a dire situation.
What's the number for the 3% and what's the number for 4%?
It depends on our enrollment. So I think maybe the 4% would be, don't quote me on it, but it's more like 110. The 3% is more like the 89, around there. We fluctuate between 90 and 98, right? Our numbers are based on October 1st numbers. And typically, also, we've been using the choice money to offset any magnet school tuition in the variability with that.
Okay, and I just want to make sure that I understand this, because as I'm looking at the open choice attendance grant, that budget summary, these are all salaries and benefits.
There are salaries that run through there, yes.
Okay, that's basically, that's the bulk of you've got rentals. What are the rentals, tuition, and supplies that
Tuition is the magnet tuition. It's the overflow. Anything that goes over 225 runs into the open choice, because we know that we have these funds, and that if we can offset the general fund anywhere that we can, we try and do that to try and relieve any impact to the taxpayer.
Okay, so again, I'm just making sure that I understand this. So the actual open choice program, you expect 752,000, and then in terms of peeling out the magnet school stuff, because that should probably just be in the magnet school line item. If you want extra in there, just put the extra in there. So we're talking $920,000. Now the rentals for open choice, what's that?
One thing, it's not if we just want extra, put extra in there. The way we have done it is because magnet school enrollment is highly variable for a couple reasons. A, you could have 15 kids decide not to go and come back all of a sudden in late August. You could have 15 kids in late August decide to go, right? So what we've done is we flattened out 225 for years. You can go back and look in the operating budget to keep that no variability, basically 0% increase on that line item in our budget for the past maybe 7 years, right? And so we know that there's going to be additional monies that are going to be required of us. The other thing is we don't control when they do an increase for magnet school tuition. So we get told what it could be, and then we try to budget. So the choice there, money, is used to offset any variability that occurs so that we can mitigate variability in an operating budget. Everything that we do with all of these revenue streams, everything is to try to mitigate variability in the operating budget. If we can mitigate variability in operating budget, then we have more consistent budgets, which we've had between 2% and 4%, about an average of like the low 3s for a decade. This is very beneficial for the Board of Finance, and this is very beneficial for the taxpayers. So there's not money that we can just use and supplant in the open choice that is going to significantly reduce the budget. Because if we go down that road, it's a fool's errand, because when the money dries up or we deficit spend and we put positions in there and those have contractual increases and our money, the choice doesn't increase, then what's going to happen is we'll find out that we lose money, and then what we're going to do is we're going to have to take positions and put them back into the operating budget, which then creates more variability. So this is a very constant way we've been budgeting with these revenue streams. Very difficult to manage, very difficult to project, but we're not swimming in excess funds every year. They're tight, and we have to be very careful of not going over, and that's why you're seeing us at the last couple of years is we're just returning no money, because everything is really, really tight, and we're doing a great job of constantly on a bi-monthly basis going through these revenue accounts and managing them and pulling and doing this and bringing people in and bringing people out. So you're asking questions about these, which is very, very complicated, and I appreciate the questions, but the money's not there. There's no $1 million sitting there. There's no $300,000 sitting there that we could just say, hey, let's lower the budget. If there was, we would have done it long ago.
Okay. Well, I just want to, why is it an open choice? Why is the excess overflow from magnet school tuition going into open choice?
Because we have more flexibility with the open choice grants. So when we have the special revenue account, that is very specific for just specific types of spending. So for example, I can't fix a door with the money from the special revenue account. But the open choice, based on the state statute, allows us more flexibility. So we use that to say, hey, with some expenses that we can either do one-time expenses, like one time we had the roof at Center School was leaking in the middle of the year. We didn't have the money in the budget. It wasn't budgeted for, and we weren't anticipating that. We took $35,000, we reported it out to the board, and we fixed the roof, and it cost the taxpayer dollars nothing, and it did not impact the budget at all, and we didn't have to fill a hole at all. So that's how we kind of run that account. It gives more flexibility for us to do some things, which is to the benefit of the taxpayers and the variability of the budget, which is what the deal was with the state in terms of trying to get people as an incentive to participate in the open choice program, which is a desegregation program, which we're one of the leaders in the Hartford region in that area.
Okay, so I just want to make sure that I'm following, that basically there's costs that are in the open choice and versus being a line item in the general fund.
Mhm.
Okay.
With that one, yes.
Okay, because that's the alternative. And this is something that's claimed in the grant to the state? Is that what it is? Or I mean, I'm just trying to understand why it's there.
It's not your typical where you draw down grant.
Yeah.
It's like they know what kids, right? It's part of the state program.
Yep.
That the open choice kids come here.
Yep.
They know the percentage. We get paid. We get automatic payments on this.
Okay, so it's based on the numbers. Okay, so there's no additional grant revenue that you're going to pick up based on the
Yeah.
kids. Okay, but so the actual grant you're expecting, if all the kids are there, you're expecting $1 million and $1 million based
If
on.
everything goes as predicted, we would
Okay.
have enough revenue to cover the expenses. But it feels very irresponsible to budget to that extent, knowing that we don't know that yet. But I wanted to make sure that I accurately put out there what it would cost to support that.
Okay, so it looks like, because it's all salaries and benefits. So, I mean, those
Yeah.
are pretty fixed costs.
Well, you also have the rentals, which is, that's how we get the Chromebooks for the district, for the one-to-ones. The tuition, which, they've been working on capping that. We have the $20,000 in supplies, $68,000 in professional development and services. So there are places where if we had to reduce, we could. The resident teacher, too, like we have that in there, we know what that cost is, but we didn't have one this year, and we ended up using that for tutoring for the students to make sure that.
So it's very appropriate to put some positions into the open choice within reason. So we're not going to put in positions at 95% of the choice funds in there, because we know that we'd be in a deficit spending model very quickly, and we'd be in trouble, and we'd put ourselves in a tough spot for the operating budget. So we're very careful about how many we put in there. Sometimes we'll put 80% of the cost for an employee in the operating budget, and we'll put 20% in the choice. And then as the years go on, we'll say, let's move that over there into the operating budget when it's prudent. But we use that to try to keep costs down for the taxpayers. So you're going to see some in there, and that's appropriate.
Okay, all right, so.
Can I ask a question for just a minute? With the magnet program, you will now be able to claim the kids in that for the education cost sharing grant. Has that been calculated into this budget?
So what's very important to know is that in the legislative session, they were looking at the magnet school funding being able to be only for sending districts only to pay 58% out of the total cost, 58. And we were aware that was happening, and that is something that we support and was hopefully is going to occur. We waited until the end of the legislative session, which was around May 8th, right? And then we got the invoices like a week or so ago for the magnet school tuition of what's projected out there. So the good news is because that 58% went through, we're going to be able to save about $33,000 of what we have right now. So that's something very easy for the Board of Education to remove from the budget, because we budgeted the 100%, not knowing what would happen to the legislative session, which is very unpredictable, as you all know, when they're negotiating money and different types of things. So we weren't able to include that when we first did the budget because the timing wasn't there. We're talking early to mid-May when we officially knew. So the $33,000 is something that can easily come off moving forward.
So, okay, well, it's a good tie-in. Okay, so just so we don't get sidetracked. So for the open choice, the tuition, I mean, you've got staff there, right? And then the rental is for the Chromebooks for the entire district. It's not the open choice kids, it's for the entire
The entire
district?
district, yep.
Okay. And that's, I mean, relatively fixed. We're not getting rid of the Chromebooks anytime soon. But really, so it's the tuition, and the resident, the salary, the resident teacher, I mean, that's a grant that used to be grant funded, so that's gone away.
Do we still have a grant for that? No, right? Yeah, I didn't
I
think
think
so.
that grant isn't funded anymore.
Yeah, I don't think so either. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
The-
Yeah, all right, so really, and then the tuition for open choice is basically magnet school overrun. Do we know how much the magnet school costs actually were for fiscal year '24?
Yeah, I'll pull that for you because I don't have it right in front of me.
Okay.
I think it was about 360,000.
All right, so 360 total, and that included the magnet school special education, was that included in there?
So the magnet school special education runs through the tuition for those kids runs through the regular ed. The magnet school special education is for additional costs related to those students that are in the magnet school.
Is that in the invoices that you got, that 360 total?
That's just the regular ed. It
Okay.
includes the typical tuition for those kids, but not the additional cost. That
Right.
has its own line.
And so you also have to remember, Logan, that although we're saying we can cut the 33,000, right, that magnet school applications and enrollment is not over. So we have initial invoices on those things, but that could very easily increase. So do we think that we can take the 225 and reduce it, $33,000 and bring that down for the operating budget? I think that's a very appropriate hedge to go on. But if the enrollment increases, then the overage will go into the choice. And so the goal will be for next budget cycle for me basically to not have 225 in the budget, but to have like the 180 in the budget and keep that flat, and then to use the choice as the overage, so we were able to ramp it down a little bit. So it's a good outcome, but we can't sit there and assume that that money now, because the magnet school reimbursement came in, that we're going to have that money, because we don't know that right now.
Okay. And, all right, so just as I'm following along, all right, so basically what the Board of Ed is ultimately doing is they're looking to keep the 51,000 in there, they're looking to keep the 100,000 in there, and then reduce potentially the 225. I mean, I just want to make sure, because that's the 100, so that's 151,000 that's just going to be, I guess, I mean, you're just going to leave it in the open choice, or is that?
Yes, because what we know we're going to spend right now, we know we're going to spend 180,000 or so.
Yep.
190,000, give or take. I'm not doing the math properly. So we know that. So we're saying we can take off 33 because these are early projections, and we know we're going to pay the 58%. But we know it's going to go up. It will not be flat. It's going to go up, and the overage will go into the choice. And how much that is, which could be $100,000, Logan,
Yeah.
I'm not going to put ourselves in a situation where I try to assume that in our operating budget, and then I have to fill that huge hole. Making these assumptions and using monies that aren't going to be there to supplant things is one of the reasons we're in this particular budget cycle with a high tax increase. Even though the Board of Education side, from the previous Director of Finance and Operations to myself, and then also the town side with the finance officer, made significant recommendations over the past 3 years not to do this fast and easy and free projections to get lower budgets in the short term, sacrificing the long term. We've consistently said that, and we were ignored, and that's the prerogative of the elected officials to make their own decisions. But the professionals here have been very clear on this point, and now the chickens have come home to roost. And that's why we have the 2.6 mils. If the professionals were listened to over the last 3 years, we would have been able to mitigate this. We would have been able to have much more gradual tax increases and possibly even less total mills at this point in time if we played it right. But we didn't do that. We took too big of a bite of the apple in these budget processes, and now we have a problem, and that's an issue.
Okay, so just, I mean, because I just did some quick math, and I just want to make sure that I'm understanding correctly as we're coming into it. If we're talking 180,000 for magnet schools, 100,000 for tuition for open choice, 51,000 for the open choice teacher resident, that's 331,000 in the budget. Budgeted for magnet school tuition of at 58% of the rate. So $570,000 basically worth of magnet school tuition bills. That's what you're looking at for a budget?
No.
No, that doesn't,
No, our current, what we've been currently sent is equals to 191,000. We're still waiting on one school, but we are willing to reduce the general fund by the 33,000, knowing we'll pick up the overages in the choice.
Okay. I mean, yeah, because I'm just looking at the numbers, because especially since as you're seeing, well, I mean, part of it is next year the magnet schools are at 58%, and then after that, magnet schools go down to 0. So
That would be great.
yeah, that's what ends up happening. So, I mean, really, this is just for a single year, and then it goes away, because that's in the legislation that got passed. So, magnet schools are going to be 0 in 26. So we're really only concerned with next year, and we're not looking at $570,000 worth of magnet school bills right now. So, I mean, it makes sense to cut it down further, and then next year we can get rid of the tuition for open choice, and we can get rid of the teacher. I mean, so those are all things that can go away because they're gone in 26.
There's flexibility.
Logan, I'm not, why do you keep saying we can get rid of the teacher residency program? That is,
Well, it's not funded.
Yeah.
It's not. It previously was grant
we are part of the teacher residency program
Okay.
is a program for minority teacher recruitment that we have been at the pilot at the ground level, okay? The program is paying a teacher from CREC to come in and teach here and then continue to teach as a full-time teacher here. That is a program that we have to spend money on to have the program, and it's been a successful program. And we're a partner with the region on that.
Okay.
And those costs are still going to be there, okay? They're not going away. That is not like,
Okay.
we have to pay for that, and we pay for it, not through the operating budget, we pay through it through the choice program, okay? So for a grant. So that money, that needs to stay there. That doesn't go away. We have to pay for that.
Okay.
So
Well,
your math is not adding up. You're giving numbers that
I'm
that
just
aren't
going
making
based
sense.
off of what I was just told. It was used for tutoring. It
You're-
wasn't used for the resident. This program.
There wasn't one available.
Yeah. All right.
So
So,
I guess-
so it wasn't used.
Right.
Okay.
That was a
ask-
one. So there's much more to that dynamic
Yeah.
this year. but I'm not going to speak about it publicly because it would put individuals in not a great light, okay?
Yep.
The program's been successful. We're using the money appropriately. It needs to stay there. The board has supported it. The state is pleased that we do the program. CREC is pleased that we do the program. It is a very good program for people to get into education that are minorities. This is a positive thing. This is something that it's grant funded. It's a good thing. I don't
Okay.
want it to get conflated with other magnet school stuff. It's really important, and we're having a great deal of success, and it's good.
Yeah, well, it's just basically, I mean, you're using the open choice funds for that versus something else. I mean, that's what it ultimately
Well,
comes down to.
I think it's very appropriate, as opposed to having it in the operating budget, which we never ever proposed.
Okay. But, I mean, that's a policy decision, okay?
No, that's a budgetary decision that we present to the board,
Yeah,
and that they approve the budget,
yeah.
and they know that that program is funded on an annual basis, and that it is funded through the choice program. So
Which can be used for other things.
it can be, yes, there's flexibility in the choice money to be used for different things.
Okay, and for that residency program, it's a fully certified teacher and all that stuff?
It's a program to get them fully certified before we hire them as a full-time first-year teacher. So essentially, they're getting paid a salary with some benefits to remove barriers of people that have difficulty trying to pay for programming to become a certified teacher. And so they're getting money to do their student teaching assignment.
Okay, yeah, and how many of those teachers do we have currently?
We have 2 of those currently,
Okay, and how long have we been doing this program?
4 years.
Okay,
4, I believe.
okay,
Right?
so 50%, okay.
It's not 50%. That's not how you should characterize it. We've had people that come in, they've been here for 3 years, and then circumstances change. And it was a teacher up, Miss Johnson, fantastic teacher, taught for us up at Crystal Lake. Her circumstances changed with her family, and she moved on. So simply just saying, well, 50% and calling it that as some sort of analysis of the program is not appropriate, Logan.
Okay.
And I don't want the program characterized in this way.
Well, I mean, as we're looking at trying to find money to cut, I mean, this is part of what we're talking about.
But
We're
you
not
wou-
talking about
but-
getting rid of an active teacher. We're
This-
talking about a
But
program.
you wouldn't cut our open choice.
You're not
That's
cutting open
general
choice.
fund,
Well,
only
what we
general
would
fund.
cut is we would cut 51,000 from the operating budget. And then the Board of Ed can decide whether or not they want to continue to use that open choice money for that residency program.
You can do that game with all the revenue, Logan, but if you take a look at our budget sheet and you actually read that, and that's been sent out, we just sent that out to the entire community before this meeting, you're going to see our budget is exceedingly tight. Literally in this budget cycle, with all the contractual obligations and all the different things, we increased this budget with all the moving around of money, $60,000 on top of what we're required to, 60.75. You take that out, you're at a 3% budget, we're at a 3.79% budget. This is a tight budget. We manage the revenue accounts very well. It's not advisable to just sit there and look at all this revenue and come up with all of these ideas that have been discussed for the last 10 years in public session over and over and over, because it's way more complicated than you're making it out to look. It just is. And I don't want to have people get misinterpret that it's just easy to do what you're saying, because it's not. Because if you go down this road, you're going to make, in the long run, you're going to cost the taxpayers more dollars. This budget, our operating budget, will end up going up higher. And I've been very, very clear with the Board of Education. If you can continue to support 2 to 4% budgets, and I can maneuver in there, you're not going to see me like other superintendents come in with a 7% budget, like they did in a town next to us. Because we've been consistent with a lack of variability. So that needs to be honored, because in the long term, it's going to save the taxpayer dollars. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Don't bite your nose off to spite your face. That's what we're talking about.
Yep.
Okay?
Okay, all right, so,
The town went mute.
Are you guys able to hear us now?
I mean,
Hey, Peg, can you hear us
Test,
now?
Can
test.
you hear now? Oh, okay.
Is there a thumbs up we can get?
I see Peg has her hand up. Okay.
Oh, I got some thumbs up.
Before we move on to something else, I just wanted to add something. First of all, I just want to thank the assistant finance officer here, who, while this discussion was going on, has just analyzed the last 17 years of daily rate of return from the STIF website. And so thank you, Felicia, first, before we move on for that. And second of all, I just want to state that since July 1st of 2007 through April 30th of 2024, the annualized rate of return for STIF is 1.28%. For context, STIF's current rate is 5.43%. Using the outstanding cash balance as of June 30th, 2023, which is our last set of audited financial statements, $17,996,064. That gives us with an estimated annual rate of investment income of $230,000, $230,349.62.
Okay.
So
Based on, based on the past 15 years. Okay.
I believe it was 17.
17.
Yeah, and that's based on the daily annualized rate of return.
Okay. And that's all that they have, or?
They went back as far as they went.
Okay. 17 years. All right.
Is that sufficient for your question earlier, Logan, or did you want me to go back further than that?
No. I mean, we'll have to, we have to consider that. I
Sure.
mean,
Okay.
Yeah, well, I just want to thank Felicia
Yeah,
and Tiffany
thank you.
for pulling that up and doing that so quickly.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. All right. So now, so there's the open choice attendance grant, the special education revenue account that you have to look at to see what the actual balance in there is.
Yes.
Okay. So that's one outstanding item. So we see basically what money's there. And then what other,
Is there a goal? I guess I just want to ask for informational, because I know there's obviously an end goal here. So when you're talking about special revenue, is there something you're trying to get to that I can think about while
Well-
answering these questions?
well, no, all I'm trying to find out is, how much, well, I mean, what do we have for the actual balance of revenue and what we have for the balance of costs. That's what I'm trying to find out.
Okay.
Okay.
Right now.
Um,
So you want all of the special revenue fund balances? They are in the
Special the special education revenue account, where, I guess where we're at, because there was the budget of $1,933,000, and then we've got $1,394,000 for costs. So,
So I guess, are you trying to figure out if there's extra money left that we can roll into next year to decrease the budget?
yeah, that's,
Because I'm going to tell you that that's not the case.
okay. Okay. And how many special revenue accounts that are outside of the general fund do you guys have?
We have our open choice, our
Okay.
pre-K, and our special revenue account.
Okay. And special revenue?
Oh, nutrition, which is its own program and you can't touch, and then student
Yes,
activities, which are
nutrition.
restricted funds.
Point of clarification, Logan, just so everyone knows accurate information, I just texted the superintendent of the correct schools, and I wanted to clarify that that the statute's automatically going to be going to zero in 2026. And he said, no, there's only 1 year in statute, could go back to 100%, 58% again, or zero. So it is not a done deal that it's automatically at zero.
Okay.
It's a possibility in the future, but we can't, again, bank on that.
Okay, because I was just looking at the bill analysis,
It-
and the bill analysis.
I'm going right by the superintendent who would know.
Yep. Okay. All right, so we have the special education revenue account, and you're going to find out about that. The open choice, and for the open choice, it's basically, yeah. And, Okay, so part of what ends up happening in that, so this makes more sense.
We asked for a point of clarification, what she's supposed to be looking for in the special revenue account.
Oh, she's supposed to look for what the actual balance of expenditures and revenue are.
So he's trying to determine that if we have money left, we can use it to offset the general fund budget.
So the special revenue fund balance is it's currently a negative 860,499 because we have not received all of our tuition payments.
Okay, and the tuition payments, those are payments coming from the different towns for the
Correct.
Yep.
basis program? Okay, so, and have those been billed out?
Yes,
Yes.
Okay, so do we know what the billings are?
yes.
What are they?
We should meet the revenue exactly, but the expenses will also match that.
Right.
If you've noticed in the next years for special revenue, which is actually, those revenue numbers are a lot easier to project. The expenses very much match the revenue. The problem that we're running into in that program is that because we do run a lot of salaries through that, it's starting to outpace the tuition numbers, and that's something that we've got to think about to make sure that that program can continue to self-sustain. So that program is very tight.
Okay, so that special education revenue, and those are, and it's basically a way to, there's money coming in from the tuition, and the idea is to put salaries and such in
That
there
support the program.
to, okay, so all of those salaries specifically support that program?
Yep.
Is that?
Yeah, the
okay.
rent for those buildings goes through there, there's the utilities for that program goes through there. If we fix something in those buildings, it goes through there.
Yep.
Those are all expenses related to that program directly.
Okay, all right, excuse me.
May I make a quick point as well? Jen Mullen, Board of Ed Secretary. We have also returned balances to the town. I can go through all of them, but I can let you know that in, I'll start at 2019, 2020, we returned 1.132470. 2020, 2021, we returned 492,101. 21 to 22, we returned $35,655. So we do our due diligence and return money when we have extra.
And last year it was no money returned, and this year it's going to be no money returned because
Okay.
things have gotten tighter and things cost more.
Okay, well, I mean, what I'm looking for is, right now, we got negative $860,499, and there are outstanding accounts receivable for tuition.
Yep.
And so, yeah, I mean, if we can find out what those, and that's all the billings, there's no additional billings that are gonna have to go out?
Nope, they're out.
Okay, so, yeah, I mean, if we can
Unless
get
we
those.
take in a kid in the next 2 weeks, which I doubt, so.
Yeah. Okay, so we, so we can see.
But
Logan,
Logan, you're not going to get what you think you're getting.
Okay,
We're not going to be able to come back on Monday and go, oh my gosh, we did some work on Friday, and now we figured out that we're going to be able to save $250,000. It's not going to happen because that's not how it works. So you're trying to apply some logic to very complicated things that are not in a time frame of 2 to 3 days. So I don't want anyone to get an impression that you going through this right now, which is fine, it's your right, and it's important for people to understand, and this is very educational for everyone, this is really good, but it's complicated, and we're not gonna learn everything in a 2-hour meeting. But what you're asking for is not gonna bear fruit to what you want.
okay,
So I don't want to leave an impression that everyone thinks that we're going to come back and go, oh my God, we found money for this. That's not what's going to happen.
okay. Well, what I'm doing is, and I appreciate, I appreciate your candor. My responsibility is I have to look at the actual numbers, okay? So I'm asking for the billings so we can see, okay? And that's what we have to do. And, we'll see the data and we'll take a look at it so that way we know. So we see exactly what has gone out for the accounts receivable, and we see the existing fund balance, and so that we could see what's there. And, I don't know what's going to be there, so that's why I'm asking
You're-
to see it.
The point is, you're not going to get to see what is there as clearly as you think and what you're trying to get. You're not going to get a black, hard and white answer to what you're trying to find. That's the point.
Okay, well, if you can get me the billings, then we could take a look.
I can give you a spreadsheet. I can't give you the invoices. They have student names on them.
Sure. I mean, yeah, all I need is, I just need a total. I mean, that's, I certainly don't want to run afoul of FERPA. I mean, but yes, you know, let's see what the totals are, you know.
Logan, I'll confer with Alicia, and we'll try to get you what we can, but I'm not promising giving you exactly what you think you're going to get. It's a fool's errand of what you're going on right now in terms of how you're trying to frame it out in public.
Yeah.
That's what I'm trying.
I'm not trying to frame anything out. I'm just trying to get
it's
an
much
answer.
more. I understand you're trying to get information, but you're not going to be able to get the information exactly how you want it with these particular accounts. It's not possible. They're complicated accounts.
Okay.
They're highly volatile. When you have highly volatile accounts in terms of projecting and in terms of dealing with children and expenses and federal laws and state laws,
Yeah.
that's what happens.
I have a question for the chair. Do we have an identified target for this evening? Because we are an hour and a half into this meeting, and we have not identified any areas where we can make a difference in the budget. And that's just out of respect for the employees and the residents that are in the room. Everyone's time is valuable. So my ask to the chair is, do we have a target? Because to reduce this budget even 0.1 mils, we are talking about $160,000 worth of cuts. And we have been here an hour and a half, and we have not identified anything. And I hope that I'm not saying this out of turn, but my ask to the chair is, what is the target?
Yeah, so the board has not discussed a firm target, so I'll ask, I mean, Logan, you're the one who was opposed to this
Yeah.
originally, so.
I mean, yeah, it's, part of it was,
So
you know,
so what are you looking for a target?
for dollars, I mean, I've got a whole bunch here, but the first step.
For a target of what you want to cut, a total, what are you?
Well,
For-
I mean, I want to get as low as we can responsibly get.
Well, we have to come up with a target of what we're looking for, because
Well,
you're just saying as low as we get is very vague.
yeah, well, we're going to run through a bunch of items, and then everybody can take a look and see if those items make sense. So I've got a whole list. We haven't even gotten to expenditures.
What's,
Jeez, my list has something like, I don't know, let's see. I don't know, I've got something like, it looks like 1.2 million is, you know, no, not for Board of Ed.
How much do you want the Board of Ed to cut? That's what we need to know.
I need to ask Alicia
Yeah.
a couple of questions myself, if I may.
well,
I don't have that number yet, because that's why I'm asking about the revenue pieces, to make sure that, okay, what is actually going to be there, and I need to see what's actually going to be there. That's why I'm asking. Okay?
I think, Mr. Chair, if I may, Matthew Reed, I'm the town administrator, and I take a lot of responsibility for what happened with this budget. Obviously, the Board of Ed took care of their budget, and I had a message to our employees who, all of our department heads are here tonight. Thank you for all being here and taking the time. And their job was to put together a budget, and I will tell you, I haven't met a more stingy group of people in my life, because I said, well, why wouldn't you ask for more than that? And they said, well, because we can't really afford to do that in the town, and they understand that. And so they put together a budget that ultimately resulted in the increase that was turned down at the referendum. But my position was, the people need to know the position that we're in this year as a result of actions that have happened over the last few years. And they need to understand that if they want the services they have received over the last several years, we have to continue to fund the budget at the same level. Unfortunately, because of the loss of federal funds and other resources, we ended up with a significant increase in a request for tax revenue from the citizens. But now we're in the position where we're in, where we need to cut. But the question is, what is a percentage that this board wants to put forward that they would unanimously support? Is it a 3% increase? Because we can pick through all of the accounts, but I will tell you, if you tell me that we can all agree that a 3% increase we will support and we will encourage people to vote for in the next referendum, understand that a 3% increase will result in a cut of about $2.3 million from the current request. If that's with a 3% budget increase, would be a cutting $2.3 million. So if you think 3% is an amount that the voters will go for, you tell me that, and I'll work with the staff, and we will come up with something close to that. But, you know, $2.3 million is going to hurt, right? Curbside trash pickup, that's $1.3 million. There you go. You're going to have to pay for it somehow, but the town's not going to pay for it. I'm not saying that's what go, but that's the size of the program that we would have to cut. From an education perspective, I don't know how deep you have to go into the education budget to get more money. But even if you cut something big like curbside trash pickup, that's half of what we need to come up with. Even if you want to go against the advice of our finance officer and you want to take $700,000 from interest income, okay, we're getting a little bit closer to $2 million. But these are cuts that are going to hurt. And then next year, as the debt comes on board for the school, the light project, we're going to have to come up with more money. So I think the very first step is the consensus as to what is going to be the percentage that works. Because 5,000 here, 200,000 here, I think is not going to be the way to do it. The budget is 409 pages. It's very large. And everybody's had this since we started working on it January 8th. And so the information has been out there. So there's a lot of questions being asked that could have been asked throughout this process. I think people here are interested to know what is the percentage of the cut that we're shooting for, so they know whether they can support it or not. And they know whether they need to now make a comment and say, no, you can't cut that type of money from the Board of Ed budget. I apologize for the long-winded comments, but I think it's important to know that if we're going to get to a workable percentage, this is a significant cut that we are going to, that we're looking at. And if we have to do it, then that's what we have to do, because obviously the voters weren't happy with what was presented, or the few people that voted weren't happy with what was presented at the recent referendum. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate it.
And also want to remind everybody too, this budget originally, we included everybody's request, was a 3.2 to start off.
Correct.
And it was cut by 0.3 mils by the town's administration and by another 0.3 mils by the Board of Finance. So it's already been cut 0.6 mils.
Correct.
Where we are right now. So we have to keep that in mind as well. We've already cut a significant portion, and some of those are just deferring costs down the road.
Yeah.
I do want to ask a question that I would not have had the answer for before. How many retirements do we have on the Board of Ed?
We have approximately, we've assumed 3 more retirements than we have. So we did another $120,000 cut, hoping that.
So you did a $120,000 cut the last time. You can do another $120,000?
No,
Okay.
we're already down 3. So we've assumed 3 more than we have. So we're hoping that all of a sudden someone's going to say they're retiring in June or July. So we've already done that. So we were aggressive with it. Usually we'll assume like 1.
So you only have 1 retired?
No, we
person
have,
for sure?
what do we have?
We had a couple, but we originally budgeted for those in the original budget. We then added a $120,000 cut, assuming we're going to get more, or hoping we're going to get more retirements.
So so you cut before you put the budget out, and then
Right.
you came back with 120.
So we did a
Is that what
very
you're saying?
aggressive projection that may not come through, but that's what we're trying to do to lower it. In terms of process, just so the board is understanding, the reason the Board of Education has a meeting on Friday at 6 p.m. here, the reason we have it is because if the Board of Ed is going to cut into this budget, our responsibility is to deliberate, and then our responsibility is to communicate it out to the community. What are the possible cuts that may occur? If we aren't able to deliberate and do that and have a little bit of an idea, once Monday comes and you do your work and you put the budget to referendum, you just say, we're cutting this amount, we're set, and then we're going off to referendum for June 11th, that enters the silent period for the Board of Education, meaning all I can do is say, hey, this is the date, time, and place of when you're voting. I can't appear to advocate through email and all those things, and it cuts out the citizens. So anyone, I'm not able to send out all this and saying, oh, we're cutting a kindergarten teacher, or we're cutting this staff, or we're doing this. So the citizens would have no opportunity to be able to know and to be able to discuss with this Board of Finance before they go and make a decision on the Monday. So the charter's tight, right? We're all working hard to try to get this done, but that's a process-oriented situation for the Board of Education for Friday.
I have two more questions for Alicia. The self-insurance program, are you in arrears basically, where you're going to be taking money out of the self-insurance fund that we have?
The end of this year is planned to be a reduction to the insurance fund, yes.
How much?
It's unpredictable right now. We're waiting for the end of year of the incurred but not received. It's the IBNR. And usually that last year that was about $360,000. So we're waiting for that number to come out. Sadly, we did have a high cost claimant that is no longer on the plan, and so that does make a difference. So we're waiting to see the effect that that's going to make. But currently on the general fund, we're over budget on the medical and dental line by $247,000.
Okay. My other question, there's 49 kids in the basis, all the programs that are in the basis building, and 13 of them are from out of district. They're tuition students. The BCBA, is that being added to increase those numbers or to maintain the numbers that are there?
The BCBA is being added to support the whole district, and that is to meet the regulations of the supervisory that has to be in place for RBTs and ABAs. Their hours have to be supervised and signed off of by a BCBA. So we've meet that capacity, and this should also help reduce outplacements. This will help, that actually costs a lot of money.
Okay, so it's not to,
Go ahead, sorry.
to add students to the program?
No, and so the number that we have for tuitioned in students is actually 11 in the basis program. So we have 11 students that come from out of district in to the program. And the BCBA is really a requirement at this point. The federal requirement is that you have a BCBA for students with autism. And our students with autism numbers have basically quadrupled over the last couple of years. Just to give you an idea, we have 52 autistic children coming into our pre-K program, with 12 additional from birth to 3 coming up the ranks, and another 4 in referral. So the federal government wants you to have 1 BCBA per 25 students. If you do the math on that, we're behind on that.
Okay.
So that BCBA is pretty much a requirement for us.
Okay, thank you.
And then if we don't have the BCBA, then we have to find a program for them outside of the school district where there will be a BCBA. So that's the problem. So this is spending $100,000 to try to save $1 million, $2 million, $3 million down the road.
Okay, so before we go any further, we need to talk.
Yeah.
What are we looking for, I mean, Logan, you're the most vocal one who was
Yeah.
opposed.
Yeah. Oh, well,
So-
one quick question on the BCBA.
No, before we go there, we need to discuss what we're looking for a target.
Okay. Well,
That's what we need to
that's
go
going to depend on the BCBA. So can I ask this question and get an answer real quick?
Go ahead.
Well, we need to talk about what we're looking for a target, then we can figure out. what-
Well, I mean, I'm looking at looks like 165,000 that we can manage to do, and that includes some money from the non-recurring capital, and we'll have a discussion about that.
Board of Ed, 165, is that what you said?
Yeah, 165.
From the board.
Well, I guess it would be, 160, well, hold on. It would be 75 Yeah, I guess it would be 75 from the Board of Ed and then 90 from the non-recurring capital. Okay? So technically, I guess that doesn't come from Board of Ed, but it would be, you know, yeah, it would be 75 from the Board of Ed, but I mean, I've got a question on the BCBA. Okay? So the BCBA, in terms of the BCBA, what do we have for BCBAs right now? We have teachers that are certified as BCBAs?
No, we have, do we have a teacher that's certified? We have one that's certified as a teacher, but you don't have to be a teacher to be a BCBA.
Yep. And our current numbers are 44, so we currently meet it, but you're saying there's 12 plus 4, so there's 16 more that puts us at 60.
No, our current number of autistic, I was just speaking about the preschool program, which has 52. But we currently have a total of 77 students in district that are autistic,
Okay.
with an additional 12 coming up from birth to 3. So once they turn 3, we have to take them, even if that's June 3rd.
Okay.
We have to take on that student.
Yep.
And then we have another 4 referrals from outside coming in as well.
Okay, so at a minimum, we need the one BCBA to be in federal compliance. Because
Correct.
we have one teacher, and then we would have one additional BCBA.
We have 2 BCBAs in district currently. We need the 3rd.
Oh, all right, so we have 2 BCBAs currently?
Correct.
So we are in federal compliance?
No, we're not.
Well, it's.
Because it's 1 per 25.
Oh, 1 per 25. Okay, and so we need 2 BCBAs?
We're asking for 1 more.
Okay.
We have 2 currently with 77 students. So if we were in compliance, we would only have 50 students, right? Because it's 1 per 25.
Yeah.
So we are currently in need of a 3rd BCBA,
But even with a 3rd, we're still short, right?
possibly.
Okay, and the consequence of being short is we have an outplacement, because we have to outplace those
Correct.
students?
And our outplacements cost us between $100,000 and $130,000.
So, I mean, I hate to ask this, because we're trying to cut the budget, but, I mean, what I really should say is that we need to make sure that we understand the value in the budget. So, I mean, is there a reason why we wouldn't look for 2 BCBAs?
Yeah, because you want to cut the budget.
Well,
Because we don't have the money for,
well, no, I'm asking, because if the
Logan, this-
requirement is,
Logan, this has been my point with what you're trying to logic here in public. The point is, the special education, the special revenue, the autism spike, the IEP process by working with families on what their plans are going to be and what services we can offer and whether we can do them in or out, it's volatile. It is very difficult to manage. And so we try to stay ahead of it. We try to ask not for more than we need. We create these in-house programs that generate revenue. We bring other students from Stafford, from Vernon in, and our staff works very hard. And so the volatility of this is difficult. And so simply just kind of putting a thing and saying, let's do a number with this and a number with this, and this is exactly what we can do, again, that's a fool's errand. We're managing complexity that changes on a week-by-week basis. That's what we're trying to get at.
So if I understand you correctly, Logan, you're saying you're looking for the Board of Education to come up with $75,000 in cuts? Is that what I heard
yeah,
you say?
75,000, yeah, 75,000, and then I guess we have to discuss the capital non-recurring. But, yeah, so it would be 75,000, because, I mean,
What is the impact, please, on 75,000 to our mill rate? Half of a tenth of a mill.
that, it would not even get us a tenth of a mil. For 1/10 of a mil, we need about $160,000 to get to 1/10.
Yep.
And I just want to remind everybody.
Can we ask about the
hold
gym
on,
floor?
Hold on, Liz.
Oh.
So,
Well,
the Board of Ed,
okay.
60,931 is their account increase when they don't account for increases in salaries and benefits. So what you're asking for to do is probably do less programs next year?
Salary increases are 2.9% for pretty much everybody.
Yeah, salary and benefit increases is 1.6 million for the Board of Ed. and then all their accounts is a $60,931 increase. So if you're asking them to cut 75,000, where are they supposed to find it? I mean, you have to give them a little.
I mean, I can tell you where
mean-
you can find 75,000.
I mean, you're
pretty
talking
easily.
about cutting teachers then.
No, you're not
that's
talking
where-
about cutting
That's where,
teachers.
that's where you're coming through,
No,
because
that's-
look at what
that's
they're on
absolutely
their, on their sheet here. They have
Yeah.
60,931, all their account increase.
Yeah.
Everything else is under these salary and benefits.
Okay.
That's correct.
Yeah.
So there's no way to find what you're asking for unless you start looking at staff reductions.
He's already cut
we-
33.
So we have the 33, so if you're asking for us, for the Board of Education to deliberate on 75, we have 33 already.
Okay.
So
All right, so 33.
we can, on Friday, we can deliberate on another 45,000, if that's what this board is kind of, is telling us to informally prepare, because nothing is official in that regard.
Right. And Scott, just to clarify, from your original proposed budget to what was submitted to the town, the Board of Ed already cut was out 80,000 from your original proposal?
80 and then 120.
Right, the
So
additional
we've cut
120.
200
Right.
from the original proposal. We're at like an increase of 60,000, 0.75, thank you. That is above all of our basically fixed contractual costs, health insurance, workers' comp, all those sorts of things.
Right.
So we've trimmed it down, and it's very tight.
Right, and that 60,000, some of that is right-sizing accounts that have been underfunded, it's various maintenance accounts, correct?
Correct. We've right-sized accounts up, and we've right-sized accounts down. So you can look at your handout there. So a good example is we spend $100,000 on athletic transportation, give or take 5 or 10 per year. This year's budget was $30,000 for that. So what we have to do is we have to still transport the kids, and we have 55% of our students that play at least one sport at the high school. So it's very popular. So we have to go and find $70,000 from all these other accounts, $70,000 from all these other accounts to make sure we can pay that. We had 19 facilities and maintenance accounts that were under budgeted. So we want to say we want to fix the doors and we have $10 budgeted. Well, the doors cost $15. We're looking through all other accounts, programs and supplies to get that money. We added the 133 in to right-size the accounts to have a more true budget. But what we also did was lower a whole set of accounts by analyzing them and saying, okay, I think we can lower these $5, $10, $15,000 to right-size them. The whole process of moving all of that money around to get as true a budget as possible for folks resulted, after the cuts, as only a $60,000 increase. We're very proud of that. That's very hard work. That's as good as a projection and a tight budgeting as you can get with all of those accounts.
Yep, and you guys also, it was January you put the freeze in again, right? It was in January?
Yes,
So-
last
so
year it was-
6 months into the year.
Last year it was
tell
December,
everybody-
Doug. It
Yep.
was December last year that we froze the budget. And what that does is it puts pressure on our teachers.
Right,
If you
so
know, I talked to one teacher, they're counting glue sticks.
Right, so my point is, you're not making it half a year before you're telling your teachers, hey, we have to freeze because we're in a real tight spot.
Correct.
So to try to say, let's cut even more right now is just gonna keep having
Right.
that same situation going forward.
Right. So it's a difficult proposition, and we understand that the finances in the entire town and the economy is not good. What we just want to make sure people understand is that this budget is very tight, and if people wanted to cut from the board a significant amount, that would be staff, programs, et cetera. They just need to know that, because there's no fluff in this budget.
Yeah, I gotta tell you, I think my biggest concern is, based on what the voter just did, if we show up with $165,000 worth of cut, the voter is going to give us a solid no again, because we've now created an expectation.
Yeah.
165,000 isn't gonna get us you a yes vote, And I think what we need to decide is what number gets us a yes vote, because if we're having any conversation beside that one first, we are,
Yeah, that's not, I mean, I think we can get the voters to get behind us if we can demonstrate that we went through this in a very public way. We can make that happen, okay? So that's what we should keep
Logan,
on
that
doing.
would be a miracle. Because
Well,
I gotta tell
yeah.
you something.
You guys were
I've
pretty
been in-
shocked about what happened on Tuesday, so
Not
maybe
at all,
things
actually.
are.
Not at all. But I gotta tell you something. Want me to tell you the history of this town? We have never shot down a budget once. It's always been twice, 3 times, or 1 year, I think it was 6 times, we had a budget pass. 7? 7, I'm corrected. Thank you, Morris, for having a better memory than I do. And I think we passed the budget in, was it September? And at that point, the Board of Ed was in a horrible position because they don't hire until they have a budget. And they have turnover every single year. Well, they're not gonna hire people that they know they're gonna have to turn around and lay off. They're better business people than that. So I think we need to figure out a realistic number that we think the voter will do, and then try to get this somehow to fit in that number, because if not, we're just having an entertaining conversation that's not gonna get anywhere.
Can I ask, a question about that gym floor? It's been years. You were going, I think the last time I spoke to you, Elise, you were gonna look into rubber or whatever. The new thing is that most schools are doing for elementary schools. And did you look into it? Is it considerably cheaper?
I'm waiting to see if we have to give it up. It's currently in the capital right now. But if it gets cut, there's no point in going down that road because we won't be able to do it.
Okay. I mean, part of what we can do is realistically, because my understanding of that situation was that they were advised not to put in a wood floor, and we don't know exactly what the remediation is. That's part of the reason why it was 110,000, because the.
No, we're not talking about the gym floor.
Okay. Well, we're looking at
have-
cuts.
We have to talk about a number that we need to get to in order so that it will pass the next time.
Okay. Well, and let's go through the numbers and see what we can come up with. And then if we don't feel like that's something workable.
We need to find a target right now. What do we want to get to? We're talking about, I mean, you're putting out 1/10 of a mil, you're talking.
Well,
about.
I'm just getting started because it's part of the revenue. Like, the revenue is a big piece. So, I mean, because again, you even heard historically, can I finish my thought?
What is your total?
Can I finish my thought?
You're not answering the question.
Can I finish my thought?
If you can answer the question.
I will answer the question. Can I finish my thought? Okay. So as we were talking about, for the collection rates, this is something that we found out that the collection rates have gotten, the estimates have gotten a lot tighter. Okay. Previously, there was room to maybe change that collection rate, the estimated collection rate. So we are looking at everything that we can look at to try to trim the budget without hurting anyone. That's the goal, to come up with the most responsible budget. And that is a very tough process, and that means asking a lot of these questions. And I know you're looking for a number, but I don't have a particular number that the voters are suddenly going to accept, because our biggest issue was this wasn't a public process, and it needs to be a public process, and we're trying to get
No,
to these
it was,
numbers.
no, hold on. It was a public process. There have been multiple meetings starting back in January. They're all public, so for you to say that is completely out of line. All right?
Okay.
It was a very public process. It's a process every year that citizens can come to any meeting they want to. There's public comment at every meeting. We have public hearings. So for you to say it was not public is incorrect.
The other part that I want to mention to you,
I was. And at that Board of Ed meeting, that's when, found out that the Board of Ed was talking with Doug, and they had a number, and as long as we came in at that number, everything would be okay, but there was room in the budget for cuts, and.
That is not
I don't know what you're talking about, and that is not true at all.
Wait a minute.
So that is not
Wait,
true at all.
people. The first deliberations, we sat down, and there was a motion on the floor that was figured out. You guys had it, you knew what it was about, and it was dumped in front of Logan and I. We never saw that motion before. We thought we were here for deliberations, and we weren't. And it was, who wants to read the motion? That's how we started deliberations.
That's not what happened at the Board of Ed. What you said was that we, on the Board of Ed level, did not have a transparent, open debate and conversation. That is not accurate. And to insinuate that the Board of Ed members were not responsible in the budget is insulting. Every single Board of Ed member voted for that budget. Not one person voted it down. That's the first thing. The second thing is there were only 2 people on that Board of Ed that asked for cuts. 2. And they had ours next to their name. So do not do that and mischaracterize the Board of Education. We work too hard and at being transparent and putting everything out there. And I can tell you right now, Liz, you worked with us for years. We go through that budget with a fine-tooth comb. If there's
I
any
went through
fluff,
that budget.
we call Scott out on that.
I've gone through that budget. I know you work very hard on it. I'm not saying you don't.
No, nobody's saying you haven't worked hard on the budget.
But you're saying we're
No,
incompetent.
I didn't say you didn't work hard.
Okay, guys, calm
Yeah.
down.
Insinuated that we had some backdoor conversation with Doug and had a number. Is that incorrect?
That's what you said.
No, that's what you said.
No, that's what you said at the finance committee meeting.
It's all in the minutes, so explain to me in the minutes where we said that.
I was there for the meeting.
And you're saying here in public forum that we said we had a backdoor conversation?
Yeah, that you had a conversation with the chairman of the Board of Finance.
That is absolutely incorrect. That is a false statement that you're making right now.
Absolutely
Everyone else
not.
that was in that room, this is a completely false
Maybe you can
statement.
air your dirty laundry some other time. We're here
Yeah.
wasting our time.
Yeah.
Listen, but
My
Logan
apologies.
has to
You're
say, I think
absolutely
the man's
correct.
doing a good job. All we're getting is arguments over here, please.
Yeah.
Logan.
So thank you. Can we?
Well, Logan,
I don't have a number.
So you don't have a number, so.
I don't have a
so
number
you-
that I think
you don't have a
the
number.
voters will accept. The voters will accept the due diligence. Okay? That's what they need to see. And that's what we're pushing through. I have a whole bunch of possible expenditures, but the first step was to dig through the revenue, okay? And there's still some questions in terms of the revenue, like we want to see the outstanding accounts receivable, okay? And because we want to understand for the special education revenue account, we want to know what that difference is. And for the, okay, so there's those pieces.
And I really do not appreciate the fact that that is what would be cut from this budget.
Nobody's talking about cutting it. I'm looking at the revenue side. So there's no cuts if we're looking at revenue, because what we're trying to do is make sure that we recognize, okay, how much funding do we have? Before we cut anything, we need to make sure that we have a very good understanding of how much revenue we actually have to work with.
And I think they have. They've done an excellent job.
Okay, well, and that's where I'm asking the question.
And what I've learned is students come in and out of that program so much. They do an incredible job just trying to handle that volatile situation. Whether it's 5 more kids into the basis program for 2 weeks and then 3 go back out. How much they work with the money that they're given to accommodate the kids coming in and not having to outplace them to another town is absolutely incredible.
Oh, yeah.
So I
everybody
don't think,
works
like
hard.
they
This-
said, you can't have a daily number.
Yeah.
You can't have a monthly number.
Okay.
It will never stay the same.
Yeah, this is about coming up with an estimate
Logan.
for the revenue.
Logan.
Yeah.
I've been listening to you for an hour and a half, 2 hours. Steve Veen's on the board, and like Angie, I've been on for a couple years. I just want to say this. First of all, it's the Board of Ed's job, working with the superintendent, to figure out the minutia of the budget. We held several public opportunities to understand and see what we do. You were at some of those meetings. We did a finance meeting, 6 meetings, public announced meetings. You were at some of those meetings. You sat through and you asked your questions. That was your opportunity to do this. You could have come back at any given time and asked for more information. You didn't do that. When you asked questions, we gave you answers. You have created a firestorm in this town that is very disruptive and unsettling. And you need to take a hard look at some of your suppositions because you don't really know all the facts. You think you do, and you don't. And there's all kinds of things here that if you want to really cut the budget, it's going to come down to jobs, it's going to come down to services to children, and the town is not going to be happy about that once it happens.
Yeah. I have no
So,
interest. Yeah,
but the
go ahead.
point is, you had months to do this. Now you've created enough information, from what I understand, has gone out that we can save all kinds of money, and we're hiding, doing a shell and pea exercise here, that we're moving things around, and it's a big mystery. It's not like that at all. And it's wrong to make the general public, some of these people sitting back here, think that you have some things that you can find. So unless this finance board is ready to do the heavy cuts, I don't think people are going to be happy. You had 1,500 people vote thereabouts. There's like 10 times that amount of people in the town. So once they find out the damage that could be done, and like Dan was saying, these referendums go multiple times. It would be a good opportunity to say, maybe I made a mistake, and move on. And just let us have one vote and get over this.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So what we need to do is keep going. Okay?
No, we do not need to keep going. We do not need to keep going. We need your number that you have represented to the public. And the reality is that all of costs have gone up. That's the reality. If you want to keep the same programming, I can only speak to the Board of Ed. If you want to keep the same programming, then this is what it costs. Just like when you drive through Dunkin' and your dollar coffee is now $4 or $5, it's the same thing for the Board of Ed. If the citizens of Ellington do not want to pay for it, they're going to have to see cuts in our programming, in our services. That's the bottom line. And if that's what they want, as we will bring it, because we're representatives. We made our best guess when we did our Board of Ed meeting, and everyone at the Board of Ed level thought this was the right decision and what our constituents would want. We were wrong. We will go back. Just give us the number.
Okay. So that's, again,
Hopefully,
Is it okay. I just have a question for the board.
Yeah.
Would the Board of Finance coming up with either a mill rate that they're comfortable with, a % increase that they're comfortable with, a dollar amount, and putting it back to the professionals that are paid by the residents of this town to give you options that you could then move on at Monday's night's or whatever meeting, so that you're still making the decision as the electors, but you're entrusting us to give you what would be possible.
that's what we're trying to get at, to say, look, correct. We need to come up with, what do we want for a target mill rate? That's what we have to come up with. And that's going to dictate the adjustments that are going to be made. I mean, Logan, you're one who's been telling people we can save all this money over. So what are you looking for?
Okay.
What
I don't
number?
have what I want to do is present the items, okay? Because first was asking about the revenue, and then moving through
So
the other items.
You don't have any type of target mill rate. So you could come back and say, let's go out and say a 2.6, a 2.5, and you think people would support that?
Wait, but can you just answer my question? Are you willing as the electors to do that process instead of doing what is going on right now? That is what I'm asking. I'm not asking for the number, I'm asking you, are you willing to do that?
Right. The process you're walking through right now, Logan, the practice you're doing, that is normally done the moment you get those budget books.
Yeah.
Normally, members would reach out to Tiffany and Felicia and make appointments with the department heads prior to the negotiations and sit down and understand exactly what those lines item are, so you have your information before you go to that first negotiation meeting, so you understand what each line item means. That didn't happen. You waited to the last moment and didn't understand what each of those line items meant to each department head. And what we did, we do zero-based budgeting, very responsible. The finance director and the town administrator cut a ton of money out of there before the first meeting and even lowered it even more. So now anything you cut from the town's budget is going to be services. So I agree with what Felicia says. Give us a number.
Okay.
We'll go back and try and figure out what we can do.
Thank you. Before we go, I believe Peg Bussey, one of our library board of trustees, had something on Zoom. Peg?
I think what,
Yeah, this is Peg Bussey, and you're right, I'm not a library board trustee, just not that library board that I'm speaking right now, not as a resident of Ellington. I understand what Felicia's saying, give them, let's let the professionals come back and do it, but even if we do that, we have to understand the one thing we're gonna have to tell the residents what they're not getting. For example, a few of us spent a lot of time yesterday looking at our library budget, which is not huge in the scheme of things, but maybe because it's not huge, it's easier to look at it in pieces. And as we looked at it, the only place that we can cut, we have to tell the residents, we have to close the library on certain days or certain hours. For example, no on Sundays, perhaps no on Saturday afternoons. Or the other places, we don't buy books. Those are the places that we have. Now, we can make those cuts if that's what everybody needs and necessary. Because I do believe the expectation has been put out to the voters that they're going to be able to go to the polls the next time, and it's going to be a budget that's greatly reduced. And they will go to the polls with a budget that's greatly reduced. They also have to understand what you're giving up. That has to be in neon lights, at least from our perspective from the library. And I think it applies to all the other organizations in town.
Yeah. I think there's what we can do, okay? Because the problem with just coming up with just saying, oh, well, let's go ahead and just throw a mill rate out there that we think people will accept. The thing is, I mean, do we want emergency services to get cut? No, we don't want to cut emergency services. That's the problem with coming up with some sort of uniform number.
So I'm saying, give us a number that is roughly where you want to end, and then give us the chance to give you options so that you can move on the options. And maybe you don't want to cut public safety and you don't want to cut education, but at least you know what choices are out there.
Right, so Felicia's saying, if we say 0.2, okay, they go back and they find, okay, here's a list of cuts that will equal this amount.
More than 0.2,
Right.
and then you choose.
And then you pick and choose what we want to cut. Because there has been expectation set that there's going to be massive cuts now. That's how I've heard from people, that there's expectations based on what was put out there in information leading up to this vote, that there will be massive cuts.
Well, it gives us context for what we're looking for, Logan, and how to help, right? Because if you're looking for a 1 mil increase budget, we should not even be discussing $5,000 cuts right now. We need to be looking for millions of dollars. So being almost 2.5 hours into the conversation, we need a starting point.
Yeah.
To understand the magnitude of where this board would like to go.
Yeah, it's okay in terms of the magnitude. I mean, yeah, I mean, I'm finding I have marked down. Yeah, it looks like it looks like 1.2 million I mean, that's, and yeah, let me run through it. I mean, that's what I'm trying to do. Okay.
So 1.2 million, for perspective, is still a 1.8 mil increase, 5.25%, just for context.
Sure, yeah,
Just
but
for
it's,
context. So everyone is understanding that means we're cutting $1.2 million from services and potentially jobs, and we're still going to the polls with a 1.8 mil increase.
yeah. Well, let me run through it, okay? And we'll run through it. Well, I mean,
Your job is
Yeah.
not to make cuts at the Board of Ed level. I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
Well,
Just,
I'm not-
that's why we're asking
I'm
you
done
for the
with
number.
Board of Ed. I mean, that's the whole thing. What's delaying this is the back and forth that you want to have.
So Logan, so you're trying to find 1.2 million, and how much of that is the Board of Ed, how much is on the town side?
I think if he got a chance to quickly go through those things instead of, you would be very surprised.
We would be done.
It would be
by
done.
now. Okay?
It's not his job, Liz.
He's on the Board of Finance. Of course, it's his job to look at what he can do for the town as far as the way he's looking at it.
Wait until now.
Because the budget wasn't passed, for one thing.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Logan, I think the Board of Ed is asking one thing, and the town is a different story.
So how much?
Of your 1.2, how much of it is Board of Education? That's what the Board of Ed is asking for, so that they can begin whatever they need to do to find their share of whatever this 1.2 is.
Okay. For Board of Ed, without the floor in there, again, that's where we're coming to, hold on. Yeah, I had, hold on, yep. So 76,000, and there's already 33, so you're talking about 44 in terms of Board of Ed. There's 44, and then there's whatever, I'm still looking to see the revenue numbers, okay?
So we can go meet and talk about the 44 tomorrow night. My recommendation for the Board of Ed people right now is that we leave. We're done.
Thank you.
So that's my recommendation. We leave. You've done your thing. We're gonna meet tomorrow night. We'll go look at the 44. We're done.
Okay.
So you're talking over $1 million from the town side. So which programs and services are you looking to
Okay.
cut?
So let's go through a couple things.
But
All
we
right.
didn't vote on it.
So starting with the non-recurring, okay? First off, for that floor for the Board of Ed, okay? Recommendation is, instead of worrying about putting in a whole new floor, okay? Since there's some discussion about, because it was not supposed to be, a wood floor was not appropriate. The question is, can we reduce it and have a feasibility study done? Is there a feasibility study that's been done for what the best floor is? Is that money that we can put it, so we could reduce and just see what exactly it should be? Because if it should be a rubber floor or something, and that's a lot cheaper, and we figured out, okay, and then they can ultimately come back to the board and then get that. They left, but I mean, okay. Well, I mean, it's ultimately something we decide on. So, all right, next piece for Tom. All right, under buildings, for the town hall gutters, okay?
Yes,
It's
sir.
listed as $55,000. I saw the invoice in there for $46,000, and we already have $15,000 in the capital non-recurring. The question is, will 40 work? So we would reduce the capital non-recurring by 15. 40 plus the 15 to get to a total of 55.
I don't really think so. I think that the vendor that gave us the quote, I just spoke with about a month ago before, obviously, budget deliberations started, and he warned me that, depending on how budget goes, we might be looking at an additional 10 to 15% increase on that quote. So we could possibly reduce the projection by some, but that also doesn't take into consideration any issues that come along the way when we go and power wash the building, paint the building, and install the gutters, because that's all an encompassing project. So when you power wash the building, a painted brick building, you're likely going to find some repointing that needs to be done of brick, and that's built into the cost of the estimate.
Okay, so it's the estimate plus basically a contingency is basically what you're looking at.
I believe so, yes.
Okay, I mean, quite frankly, okay, well, we'll see, all right, because it's basically, it's a contingency and it's coming in tight, and we'll find out what it is.
I mean, for all intents and purposes, if the Board of Finance would recommend not installing the gutters and not painting the building, that's the Board of Finance's recommendation. I put forth a budget that I believe takes care of the maintenance required for the town buildings and the town facilities, and it's on you all to make a decision on whether or not we put that through.
Okay.
But I also understand that that building is a great example of where if you defer $1 worth of investment, it can cost you $5 to take the next step. It's the nature of that type of brick.
Well, it's not just the brick aspect of that building.
Right.
And that building happens to have a slate roof. The building is 109 years old. We have to have somebody out every 5 to 10 years to inspect and do the repairs on the slate roof. That is not a cheap process and is also a specialty process, so we have to hire a very specific vendor to take care of those slate tiles on the roof. Additionally, we had put forth a proposal for discussion purposes only of $100,000 gutter installation, but was recommended to me that we not put that in the budget package because it would get shot down. So just for reference, the $100,000 budget package was aesthetically copper, really nice period style gutters that would, be a nice accent to the building. We've now retracted that, and now we're going with your standard 6-inch white aluminum downspouts and gutter systems.
Okay. And so ultimately, that project is coming in around 70,000. Is that?
It's potential. I mean, I don't know the level of pointing that they're going to find as they start to uncover things when they power wash the building.
Okay.
I mean, you could walk up to the back entrance of the building and see for yourself there's failing brick.
Okay. I mean, then what my thought is, honestly, is just come back to the board for the additional money for the contingency if that's what it comes down to. Rather than overfunding it and then seeing what happens, then how about we get the project done, and if you need more money, just come back.
So you'd rather be
based on actual.
So you'd rather be underfunded?
Out of the reserves, first of all. Second of all,
Well,
second of all, the $15,000 you're referring to, Logan, is town hall addition renovation on the capital schedule. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah.
That is for additions, or not additions, excuse me, renovations and maintenance to every single town building. That is not specific to the town hall. It's called town hall renovation because that is the money that's used in the event something is broken, etc.
Okay, so it's not actually assigned to the town hall.
Are you the capital non-reoccurring
In the
spreadsheet?
capital non-recurring, yeah.
It's for town buildings.
Okay, I mean, I'm just going by what I had seen on the.
Sure. But I just wanted to make sure you had that information, the context.
Yeah, it says, town hall gutter hold on.
That's the 55, right? 55.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the 55,000, which is the capital project that Tom had submitted. The additional 15 I believe you are referring to is what's currently allocated in this year's budget.
Town hall, well, yeah, the town hall renovation.
That's
addition.
for, that's renovations or repairs or maintenance to any town building, not specific to 55 Main Street.
Okay, all right, but we could use that money for the town hall gutter project.
That's a question for Tom. Tom might have additional plans or things that need fixing, or I don't know what your plans are.
I do not. It's left there because it will roll into that account and we can use it if we need it.
Okay.
But if a $15,000 cut would make you happy, by all means.
Okay, well, I mean, well, everybody laughs about 15,000, but it adds up. That's what we're trying to get to, okay? All right, so 15,000, okay, for the town hall gutters, all right. And then, all right, you've got various, like the transfer station, the generator. I mean, these are are these allocations or actual projects that, are these actual projects or are these just allocations?
Which accounts are you specifically?
Okay, I'm
referring
looking
to?
at the town hall, or sorry, not town hall. It starts with into the buildings. The transfer station upgrade, oh, there it is. Yeah, under miscellaneous, the transfer station site improvements, the generator upgrade, the various court maintenance. Yeah,
Well-
we've got 20,000, 5,000, 20,000.
I believe that generator upgrade's already been removed
Yep.
from the
The
budget.
Okay,
ambulance
all right.
generator has already been removed, yep.
That was
transfer
cut our
st-
last.
Yep.
The transfer
All right.
station upgrades has already been cut by $10,000. The
Yep.
remaining funding in that line item is, again, supposed to help us save up for some re-engineering of the property over there on Hoffman Road to
Okay.
better utilize the facility. You're referring to high school track, that funding line item, I assume, in the tennis and basketball courts.
Yeah,
Those are, again, reoccurring funds to help us save up for maintenance.
okay.
We just invested a significant amount of money, $613,000 into the high school track that was ARPA funded.
Yep.
And it'd be an awful shame to not have the money to maintain that track in the future. I have estimates of the 3 to 5 year plan that I provided in my capital projection of a
Yep.
$55,000 expenditure in the 3 to 4 year mark.
Yep.
And then in the 7 to 8 year mark, they're projecting a $200,000+ expenditure. For tennis and basketball courts, we're talking about the same thing. That's repainting or power washing and crack repair.
Yep.
This budget was specifically designed to hopefully reduce the peaks and valleys in the significant impacts on the taxpayer. The town likes to have nice things.
Yeah.
We need to maintain those nice things so they stay nice.
Sure.
And that's what this budget was built around. So when we talk about cutting them, just understand that at some point, we'll be coming back to the boards for funding to do replacements instead of maintain.
I mean, or to do the maintenance at the time that the maintenance actually needs to be done.
Correct.
Yeah, and I'm okay with that. I mean, that's something that, because part of it is just trying to get through this year and see what we can do.
Yep.
Okay?
Yep.
All right.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Morris.
I'd ask for a break. We've been at it for 2.5 hours.
Okay, yeah, we'll take a 5-minute break.
Thank you.
Okay.
I wish you said that 5 minutes ago. I wish you said that 5 minutes ago.
Oh,
I
my
used the bathroom.
I need to talk to the superintendent about the children's chairs he gave us.
Well, that's good.
Since 2 I was sent, I posted the 4 since I was 8.
Okay, so we're calling the meeting back to order. It is 8:35. So we're going back here. So we have to come up with a targeted mill rate. That's what we have to come up with. We can't be going and saying maybe this, maybe that. We need to come up with a targeted mill rate first of what we want to see. I mean, Felicia asked a great question to say, hey, look, give us a target, let the town professionals look into it and come back with an array of solutions. That's what we need to do right now.
Okay, I mean.
That's
then
what we
I would-
need to do, so Logan, you've been the one who's been all opposed to this from day one, so what do you,
I don't have a number, but what would your number be?
well, you're the one who's been opposed to this. I mean,
Well,
I was in favor of this budget of
Yeah, my
of
process
this.
is going through, I mean, let's go through and take this
Well, no,
first pass at these
we need to
expenditures.
find a targeted mill rate that we think the voters will accept, and if,
Okay, well, what's your number? I mean, what do you think? What do you think they're gonna accept? Because it wasn't just Dem voters that rejected this budget. So that's why, what numbers do you guys think? I mean, I'm one person, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of us. So what do you guys think? What's your number?
We told you what our number was in the first budget.
Yeah, and it got shot down, so what's your new number?
Well, what's your number? You're the one that was out there
I-
telling everybody that it was.
I told you 1.2 million, like and I got all these
Okay.
numbers and let's
If
run
that's-
through 'em.
if that's your
But
number-
outside of that,
If that's your number, then we give it to the people. We already eliminated a certain amount from the Board of Ed. You give it to them and let them see what they can come up with.
and then okay, so on Monday,
We'll give you options and you can choose what you want.
okay.
and if you have suggestions, you can feel free to email our finance officer, our town administrators, that they can pass them out to the different department heads so that they're aware, so that they can look at it and see what the implications of those cuts would be, about what programs would be cut, what services would be cut.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, well, let's see what they, let's see what they come up with. But I mean, but you guys don't have a number, is what I'm hearing. Or your number was the 7.56% increase.
You know something? If you looked at it, and everybody likes to just summarize the 7.56, it sounds simple. Okay, the Board of Ed had one number, the town had another number, both of them were very realistic, and then we had the capital account, which frankly we know had been removed from the actual town funding side. It was not a high budget number, but it's a number that now that it has to be moved back to the taxpayer side, now that ARPA's done, now that all the other federal funds are done, that's what kind of skewed this. That's what we kept referring to. It created a small cliff for us. That was the cliff created. It wasn't that spending jumped. Spending didn't jump. As a matter of fact, if I remember right, that capital account was actually less this year than it was last year. But unfortunately, with no federal funds, it now falls back to the taxpayer, which is where it was 3 years ago or 4 years ago. So we created a cliff. We had this aberration. We knew this was coming. This wasn't a shock. And now it's here. We had a reasonable Board of Ed budget. We had a reasonable town budget. And we had a capital account that was actually less than it was before. But unfortunately, again, due to the funding structure, we are where we are. So it's not like, to sit there and say it was just 7-point-some-odd%. Yes, it did come out that way. But it wasn't the spending that made it create that situation. It was the revenue that created that situation. And it's not something that you or I or anybody who's seated at this table right now can fix. The reality is the federal money's done, it's gone, and we still need to maintain our properties. We still need to service our students. We still need to plow our roads. And yes, we want to collect our trash too, because that would be a real bummer if we lost that one. But again, so you look, unfortunately, a lot of people now are under the impression that there's this pack of fluff somewhere. And if you were to look, the history of this town has always had very lean budgets. If you compared our town taxes to almost every town around us, we're actually less. We've always had a lean budget. I know this might predate you, but if you remember Bob Clements, Bob Clemens glued signs together to reuse things because Bob Clemens was so cheap. And I'm looking at Barry, who's smirking right now. Pretty good. I like that one. Good shot, Barry. But you look. This has always been an extremely conservative town. So it's not like some towns that it was easy for some towns to make adjustments. We didn't have a lot of those options. This one was a very different situation. So the fact those federal government funds were used the way they used them, you know something? I didn't sit here, I didn't get a vote. They were probably practical at that moment, and they were hopeful that it would work out. Because had we got the original Board of Ed money that we'd expected from the government next year, that would have been a $500,000 difference. Well, guess what? Formula changes, we don't get the $500,000. They banked on it last year thinking that this year they would have it, which would mitigate part of their problem. Well, guess what? It didn't happen. We didn't get it. $500,000 would have felt like a godsend right now. You and I would be sweating a lot less and probably actually having a nice glass of water together, talking in the parking lot. But instead, we're sitting here trying to deal with a situation that's not so fun. So the reality is we have an awkward situation where now not only do we have what is, in my mind, a lean and responsible budget. Our staff did a great job. It's the circumstances that caught us here that are not, that's the issue. The circumstances are, we don't have those federal funds anymore, and really, I don't think a lot of us are gonna be comfortable cutting some of the services or whatever has to be done to make this work. You know, this is a tough one. So you sit there and you say to us, what's our number? I feel like we had a realistic number. Unfortunately, the public, despite Zoom, despite the fact meetings are recorded, despite the fact that everything is on the town website, I know that people feel like we didn't communicate well, and clearly I would agree with them. I don't know what we could have done differently. I know I saw one suggestion on a Facebook page that somebody said, how come you guys aren't taking advantage of the community voice channel? Maybe more people would watch that. Well, I gotta be honest with you. I don't care what we have to do to communicate better in the future. I'm very open-minded to that. But guess what? That doesn't get us beyond where we are today. The problem is that we now have a public that I think has a misunderstanding as to what has happened here. I think the public's perception of what's available to cut and what they won't lose is out there in a way that we've got a tough situation here now. People are going to lose things and they're going to ask questions. And I'm disappointed to say, because I got to tell you, I am cheap by nature. I genuinely am. You don't believe me? I mean, I reuse paper in my office. I mean, I am cheap on things that you would, and for me to sit there and to be comfortable with that last budget, knowing that it still made me wince, but I couldn't talk myself into a lower number comfortably, that was my comfort level. What we're doing right now, I spoke to the superintendent a couple of times this week since that last budget. He told me what they had that they could cut comfortably, which was the number he offered up today, which he didn't have that number when he did his budget. Now he does. This is a sticky time. So to sit there and say, what's my number? We told you what the number was, and you didn't agree. So in all honesty, we're looking at you asking what the number is, because frankly, this room, this table, the day it is voted to send things to the public in the past, was unified. Even if everybody didn't agree, they sat down and said the table did the best they could, and everybody went out and promoted the budget. And that didn't happen this time. And with that, we're no longer in the driver's seat of, and by we, I mean this table. We didn't unify. With that said, we're kind of looking at you because you were the one that led the charge. So for us to you to look at us and say, what's our comfort level? We already told you.
Yeah.
This is where it is, so.
Yeah. I mean, so what I want to do is let's run through these items, okay?
Yeah. We're looking for a number.
Logan.
I know you're looking for a number, except that
The thing is, it's not just me. It's that, you know, 1,000 voters said no to that number. So you need to come up with a new number. You had a number, it got shot down. There needs to be a new number.
Well, do you think those numbers, you're better off using, you know, something you're going to disagree
yeah.
with me on something, and I'm going to say this, and I'm not trying to be combative, but you're going to disagree with this. You have treated the people over there in an adversarial fashion. They are your greatest asset, because no matter what, you and I don't fill potholes. You and I don't do a lot of things that they have a lot of knowledge on. And guess what? If there's $1,000 to be found, they find it. I'm not going to find it by digging through this book, because I'm going through this book and there's no gleaming anything. You're going through the book and you're talking about 5,000 and 15,000. 5,000 and 15,000 is not going to get us to $1 million, which is what you're still looking for from them. If you gave them the number and asked them to do their best, if you have questions, call them up Monday and spend the day with these people, because guess what? They're smart people. Take advantage of the resources we've got, because right now, you sitting there doing what you're trying to do, the way you're doing it, you're not getting the answers you want. You're missing part of the point here. There's a value, and I got to tell you, maybe because I've been here so long, maybe because I know so many of these people, there's not one of these people that if I had a question, I couldn't call and ask them. And guess what? They'll take my call. They're remarkably friendly people. We need.
Are you looking for 1.2 mils cut or 1.2 million?
1.2 million.
Okay.
So with that said, I think what I would.
That would make a mill rate increase of 1.8 mils would be the increase. That would be a 5.
Reduction from where we are now. 0.8 reduction. 0.8 mil reduction from where we are now.
So it would be a 5.25% increase.
So let's let them do their job and call them Monday, because I was going to say tomorrow, but I just remembered today's Thursday.
Oh yeah.
You know,
yep.
I got a feeling someday I keep saying
Can
I
I
want
just
banker's
offer a
hours.
suggestion on one thing? On the capital improvements, next year there'll be more money between the abatements being decreased for some people, and they'll be paying taxes, from what I've heard. And also there'll be revaluation of the houses, and more money will be coming in.
No, revaluation is another year. That's 2 years of reevaluation.
Okay, but basically I was saying if we could wait and basically switch the two numbers on the bottom, so that the numbers that, the total for this year was 1,470,000, and next year for capital improvements you have 1,242,000. If you could work with that to keep it down to what it would be next year and just hold off a little bit, that would save 220,000.
Can I ask you a question? though? Keep in mind, next year we have a high debt service coming in for the school, and the year after that, we have another high debt service.
I don't think the debt service will start.
Yes, yeah, next year,
Yes, it is.
it's
Yeah, but
about
next year-
$1.1 million
next-
or so.
The end
There
of the
you go.
year, for the 26,
No, for the
27
next-
school year.
For the next budget year.
One year from now, when we're discussing this, we'll see that debt line increasing $1 million.
But
for
it would be
principal
the
payments.
26, 27 year, when it
25,
opens,
26.
It'll be the 25, 26.
before it opens.
Yes,
Yes.
because we're taking out the
So
financing
again,
as we
that's
build.
why we were so pushing to try to resolve things this year, because we can't, if we kick it to next year and the year after, we already have an additional $1 million of bills going out beyond normal salaries, beyond benefits, beyond costs of product.
And also the grant list could be significantly changing next year too on the motor vehicle side with the methodology of how they're calculating those values, going from what the current value of the car is to MSRP minus depreciation. So that could be a significant
Yeah,
change as well. So that could be another loss
Yeah,
that
I
we're dealing
realize
with.
that.
Because this year was over $200,000 loss on the revenue side because of that grand list decline. So we could have another one of those next year potentially based on this new methodology.
And I think they're still targeting removal of the car tax altogether, which would be an incredible challenge. So, Mr. Chairman, a $1.2 million cut has been suggested. If it's a consensus of the board that we should move forward with that and you want to provide me that direction, I'll work with the finance officer, the department heads, and we'll provide you with a menu of choices, a pick list that'll include programs, services, use of the interest income, and perhaps debt stabilization fund. We'll let you know what's available up to date and all of those items, and you as a board can sit and pick and come up with exactly what you want to make effective as the cuts. And then that would allow the referendum to go forward with a 1.8 mil increase, which is a 5.25%. If we think that's going to be palatable to the voters, and it's promoted properly, then that would be, those are the steps that we can take.
Right, and the board is not locked into that decrease either. We look at the menu of options, we could say, nope, this is not gonna work, and it could be a difference.
Yeah, you can pick, you may add up more of them and come up with more increases, you may come up with less. I mean, we're assuming that the voters voted no because they wanted to pay less. Who knows? We heard from some people here today that they're saying, why aren't we spending more to enhance the services? So we may get as many no votes because people think we should be spending more. I mean, we don't know why people are voting no. But if you want to cut 1.2 million, I'm telling you that we can put together a menu of cuts that you can pick from.
Because ultimately, we have to have this set Monday night. Because
we have to
For the
publish all of this in the
referendum.
paper Wednesday.
Right, Monday night, it
Now,
has
will
to be
you
done.
email us those, so?
If we can get them
before-
together, if we can get them together first thing, because we'll meet together. I mean, obviously we've been working on this, so we have ideas of where money is going to come
And
from.
would that also include the capital improvements? Thank you.
Everything. Yes, remember the capital improvements, you just kick the can down the road.
Right.
That's the other thing you have
I
to
know,
remember.
but maybe
And-
there's somewhere they can,
So
they know
just,
it.
just napkin math here, right? So if you're looking for $1.2 million and you want $75,000 to come out of the Board of Ed operating budget, and you want, per Liz's request, $200,000 coming off the top of the
No,
capital
no, I
budget.
just said if you could do that.
Sure,
If
but
I was-
that's a rough idea, right? So then that leaves us a hole to fill of $925,000 of cuts. I can tell you right now, just so there's no surprises on Monday night, we can get together and come up with a host of options. But with a price tag of $925,000, there's no rabbit sitting in a hat in a corner of a room that we can just say, oh my God, here we are. It's going to be reserves. It's going to be fund balance. It's going to be things that are going to jeopardize the fiscal health of the town. And if it is not those things, it will be services. To be clear, we will 100% get together. As Dan mentioned, I have the privilege of working with a lot of very talented and very smart individuals. We will put that list together. But with a price tag of $925,000 after those three things are backed off the top, it is going to be services or it is going to be the financial health of the town.
And I understand that, and I can't say this is in my comfort level. I understand that.
Yep.
But
I just
also-
wanted there to be no surprises for Monday.
Right, and I remind the board, the town does have a policy that we want to have 10% in our reserves there. So we have to keep that in mind. So there is a town policy that we try to abide by.
We have a review in September to review our bond rating, which, as you know, was
Right.
increased.
Correct.
That was increased back in December.
This past
Correct.
year, and we would hate to lose that because
Right.
that would be, have that drop again, that would be a significant cost when it comes time for interest on the
Right, and it
loan.
would not look good that bond rate
Right.
went up in December just to drop in September.
Right,
In
you
9
know we
months,
want
it would-
stable, we don't want peaks and valleys.
Correct.
So nonetheless, we'll put together a responsible list of choices that the board can work on. If that's
Just
your
one
direction.
thing that I would just push for, if, for some of the items, if people haven't looked for available grants, we'll take a look, because I mean, a perfect example is like the body armor. Department of Justice has a 50% grant. You
Very
did that-
active in all of those.
Okay, so
grants, right.
that's being netted in the budget, or? No, there's a bulletproof vest It's through the U.S. Department of Justice. It's a 50% grant for bulletproof vests. And
Not this year, but years ago.
okay, yeah, because you have until June 10th to submit an application to the DOJ. So that would so that's another $13,000 that we don't cut body armor, but we get the federal government to go and give us $13,000. You know, take a look at what we can get. You know, that's I'm not saying, but just as you're going through it, take a second look.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, any further direction for
I don't believe we
myself
have
and
any
finance?
direction at this time. Unless anybody else has anything else they also want to comment, or is there anybody on Zoom? Mary Carden?
Hi, thank you. Dan, I wanted to go back, I had my hand up for a while, so I apologize if I rewind something you said earlier. You referenced being on the board for quite some time earlier in the conversation about, prior years there were rejections of the budget, sometimes multiple times before it passed. And so with your experience and anyone else who's been on the board in the past where we've had to come back and present a different budget, a lower budget, what was the approach you took? Was it to land on what amount would be cut, and then as peers would do here, going back to those experts to figure out where those cuts be made, or was there another approach?
The approach in the past, I'm gonna look at Barry also, was to set a dollar figure as a target and take it from there.
A dollar figure of cuts?
Correct.
Which is what you're doing here?
Correct.
Okay. The other thing I just wanted to clarify for my knowledge, you talked about federal funds creating a cliff. Are you talking about the ARPA funds that we're no longer receiving?
It would be and I'm gonna look at our finance director. If you wanna give the actual fund names, but it wasn't just ARPA, I don't think.
I believe a lot of the prior year budget with regards to capital, Mary, was funded through the ARPA program, which is a federal program.
And approximately how much in the past two budget years do we have?
Hundreds of, I would have to get that number. I can bring that number on Monday just so I'm not speaking out of turn.
Okay. I mean, I guess it wasn't my understanding that was so much money that it would account for the total increase over past increases in the rate.
Yeah.
I appreciate you looking at that.
As a matter of fact, if I remember right, and again, I'm looking at our finance director, the capital budget, it's actually 20% is what it's reflected as in the budget for the funding
increase.
issue, correct?
The increase, $400,000.
Yes, a 20%
Yeah.
increase.
Right.
And the Director of Public Works just clarified that at a minimum, Mary, the track project, the high school track resurfacing was a $600,000 project. That was originally in the budget, and that was cut out and funded through ARPA.
Yep, I also remember, I believe it was Crystal Lake Fire Department, their rescue tools were pulled out. I think that was about $100,000.
$125,000 for the rescue tools, yep.
That was pulled out, and there are a bunch of other projects.
Yep.
That otherwise would have gone through.
But I can get a comprehensive list for Monday, but just off the top of our heads, that's, yeah. And
then there's also been conversation about the debt coming due in the next budget cycle. It would be, I think, very helpful for the voters in town to kind of have a projection of where we as town, through the Board of Finance, where we think the big swings are going to be next year. Some folks have talked about an increase in revenue as a large event expires, and there's conversation about, expenses increase as the debt coming on board. So I do think it's helpful in these conversations to also help project for the residents, so they see where this is coming and they can understand as budgets are being proposed, but also like off-budget cycle where, so voting on things that, whether they want to approve or not, expenditures, but they understand that all these things are impacting what the potential mill rate could look like in the next year, 2 years, or whatever we can project.
So we only have, at this point in time, Mary, I think the thought process is very logical. Unfortunately, that's very difficult in exercise because there's so many variables. Also, we are having a difficult enough time finalizing this budget, let alone asking me to forecast next year's budget at this point in time. So much changes with the grand list, the motor vehicle valuations dropped. There's building projects that are stalled in town that impact the grand list, residential, commercial, crumbling foundation, all sorts of things that change the grand list. So it's very difficult whether or not the cap on motor vehicle is going to be reimbursed to the state on a year-to-year. That's massive, and that's something that is at this point in time unknown. So it's super hard. We do have a projection on debt. It's a very rough estimate, and it's subject to change depending on market fluctuations and the bond rating of the town. Obviously, if massive cuts to fund balance are made on Monday night, it's going to impact the bond rating. It just is what it is. So in theory, it's a very logical ask. In practice, it's very difficult to give you something concrete for next year that will ease everyone's mind.
Yeah, right. Sorry, Tiffany, I appreciate what you're saying. I wasn't suggesting a whole budget, just talking about the big things like that that need more coming as opposed to the actual definitive dollar amounts.
Right.
For example,
and honestly, this fall, after we go out to bond, and Tiffany will have a much clearer picture come this October, November of what that bond is going to be, what those costs will be on that.
Right, and I can tell you that debt service alone is projected to go up from where we are in the budget that you're looking at. It's projected to go up another $1.1 million. And keep in mind, 1 mil is $1.5, $1.6 million, right? So almost a mil. 2/3 of a mil is just debt alone.
Right. For the debt servicing, what's the yield that's expected for that debt servicing?
For the debt service thing, the yield, the
Yeah,
coupon?
The yield.
Are you asking the interest rate?
All right, I guess if you're selling it at par, what's the coupon rate?
Well, it depends on what happens with the bond rating. It depends on what happens to the interest.
Sure.
It's a 4. We're anywhere between a 3 and a 4% rate.
Okay.
Depending on market, depending on rating.
Yeah. What rate did you use to prepare the estimate for the debt servicing?
I just told you that those are the
3
estimates.
to 4%.
We have multiple scenarios.
Okay.
Correct.
So when you say the 1.1 million, is that the 4% rate?
That
4%
is
coupon
at give me 1 minute. That is assuming a 3.28% interest rate.
All right, 3.28.
So that's low, conservative.
Okay.
Or maybe not conservative enough.
That's optimistic.
Right.
Okay.
Correct.
And the debt stabilization, that's basically to prepare for the return of principal that has to be done?
Debt stabilization, mill rate stabilization is what it's technically called, is assigned fund balance that is available to stabilize the mill rate, right? To avoid years where we have mill rates of 25 and years where we have mill rates of 45. It's to bring relief to stabilize the mill rate. So that initiative was started at the beginning of the Windermere project, where we realized we are going to have peaks and valleys in our debt service. And those peaks and valleys are going to cause situations that we are in currently with rising principal and interest costs that are coming due. So the mill rate stabilization fund is there in the event we can pull relief from the mill rate stabilization fund to offset the general fund budget to lessen the impact to to the taxpayers, right? So it's essentially a technique to save now for tomorrow's bills. So the mill rate stabilization fund, if used strategically, is going to be used over the course of the next few years to offset the years where we are almost $5 million in debt service. We are currently at $2 million in debt service, right? So the whole tactic behind utilizing a mill rate stabilization fund as part of a financial tactic in the budget is to have that flexibility in the future to avoid being in the mid to high to avoid being in a mill rate over 40. It's essentially a way to help level the budget.
It was really discussed primarily around the Windermere debt
Correct.
service.
Correct.
So people need to understand that it wasn't because of a rainy day this year. It was designed because we knew
Correct.
next year
We can build gradually as
Correct.
opposed to do nothing, panic.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
Okay.
'Cause
All right.
you gotta- in fact, for a little history, one of the building projects that we did for the school system also timed poorly for a bad economy. And that was the year that ended up such a tragedy. We ended up going back to our teachers, our administrators, and everybody else for pay freezes and
Yes,
rollbacks. And
yes.
I mean, that's because we weren't prepared for the debt service that came on. We just weren't ready. This was designed specifically to avoid doing exactly what this town went through. And I know Liz was involved with the uncomfortable conversations, because nobody wants to call somebody up and say, hey, have you thought about a pay cut lately? That's
The best I can do for you is a freeze.
yeah, and it was not a fun time to be anybody. So I know that was in the conscious mind of the town leadership to be sure, or try to avoid. That's why I was kind of impressed when this program came along, that you guys, that was created. It was the right way to go. Again, as you put, put a little in the kitty today to help avoid a heart attack tomorrow, which is just perfect.
I agree with that as far as the debt service is concerned.
There's a nice guy in the back waving
Yep,
at you.
well, actually, I think Miriam had her hand up first. So,
Speaking as an individual, but a Board of Education member, I would like to take this opportunity to ask you, Matt, to ask you, Lori, to ask the board to come up and think about how we can better communicate to our citizens. I've been through the Windermere referendum. Turnout was abhorrent in my mind. Yes, it passed, but when you talk about the number of votes, yes, it passed maybe 2-1 or 3-1, but when you talked about the number of people who actually came out, we talked about the number of people who actually came out to vote for the HVAC referendum. I think a lot of people came out to vote because you can say all you want about it being on the website and here and there, but we have to find a way as public officials, elected officials, to get our message out to people. And I hope this is a lesson and we have a positive result from this, and help us move forward to communicate better with our citizens, because I think if they understand and they know what's going on, they will be supportive. But I, for one, have spoken to Scott numerous times about that year that the budget wasn't passed until, I think, the last week of August. And he tells me he thinks things started in 2016 when he got here. So some of us have a long memory, and we need to also, we haven't had a budget turned down because we haven't had much of an increase. And so we're going to have increases. We want the services. We need to find a way to tell our people and communicate with them.
I can tell you, I think, and I'm looking at Lori, because clearly this has come up in a couple of different directions now, and I'm thinking it's not just our board, but we need to have a dialogue with the Board of Selectmen. There needs to be a communication with our town administrator, who is sitting here also. This is a good opportunity. So I'm not gonna disagree with you. I don't have the answer on how to make the communication different, but I think it's one of those things where we need to get beyond where we are today and begin a conversation as to where we could see room for improvement, so. And again, Matt's sitting there shaking his head a lot, yes, so.
57 years tells me, I've been here for 57 years, and it tells me that I think we need to do something.
If I may, it's funny, I had a conversation with Tiffany today and said, when this is all over, let's look at ways we can, one, come up with, somebody called and was upset because all the budget stuff was happening and they didn't realize what it was, and they had one of our communications person, Julia, in our office said, where's the budget and how do I find it and how do I look at it? And so she walked her through the website. This person was on the website, pointed her to where it was and pointed her to where the file was, and she opened the file and she said, well, this is 460 pages or whatever it is. And she said, yes, it is. Well, that's too where's the simple version? And she said, that's the budget. There isn't a simple version. So I said to Tiffany today, I said, it would be nice if there was a simple version where we could use some graphics and we could say, these are the major accounts, these are the drivers of the account, so that people had the information. But how do we get it to them? And I said, well, let's look at our list of cuts. Communications account, right? All townwide mailings, zero. That it costs money to do those things. But I think especially now, since the Journal-Inquirer simply refuses to write what they call process stories. They like stories that stir up controversy, which is why we've seen a lot recently. But when we simply told them about the budget and that we were preparing to vote on the budget, the response was, we don't write process stories. So we're left ourselves to get that information out. So we do sandwich boards out in the public. I'd love to have electronic message boards in front of the firehouses and in front of the town hall and in all of the popular, but that costs money, right? Significant money to put those in and make those happen. And obviously website, social media, word of mouth. The word I think it's getting out there, but I think it's like when a tree falls in the forest and no one wants to hear it. Does it make a noise, right? So we're sending the message, but I don't know that the receivers are willing to receive it until it becomes controversial.
I think people still have to take some responsibility on their own to ask or look
Right,
it up.
I agree, but you're right. There's a certain level of marketing that we're responsible for, and the newspaper we know isn't going to do it for us anymore. And so, in a future budget, you may see a line that includes 5 townwide mailings. We took advantage of the motor vehicle tax bills that are going to be mailed out, and we spent $1,200 this year to put a flyer in there that advertised some of the town's specific programs, the senior tax relief, some of the human service programs, and some of the services offered by our ambulance corps, CPR training and the like. And in my mind, that's a worthy. A lot of people, it's going to go in the trash, unfortunately, because people only read the things they want to read. But we're trying to look at methods to reach out. And I think townwide mailings, it's old-fashioned. We know there are some streets don't even have mailboxes anymore. But we are looking at methods for communicating, Miriam. So yes, I appreciate that.
If you do that, there's really no need to send a mailing to people, say, 65 and under. They're pretty much looking at the web. And
well, no, you have to send,
and if
you have to do it to everybody or nobody. You can't
Right, that's
just
a tough one.
go
I
pick and
agree
choose.
that there are some
But
people who
that's
prefer
not-
other.
I mean, you
I'll say
you
that's
can
not
do
part
it
of
with the
tonight's.
voter list, but
That's
that's
not part of
about
tonight's
it.
deliberation. So
Thank you.
we're gonna move on. I believe our Dave Stavins had a comment.
Is it on? I just want to say I supported the budget as it was, and I think that everybody did a great job. But you asked the Board of Ed, and I'm not against the Board of Ed, I have 3 kids in school still, to come up with $75,000, and you want the rest of the budget, the rest of the town managers and department heads to come up with $1 million. Why do they have to shoulder all that responsibility? It's just not right. I mean, the disparity is you got a $48 million Board of Ed budget and a $25 million somewhere in their town budget, and you want the cuts all come from the town. I think we ought to think about that.
That's got a good point with that.
Right. I think that's what we need to see what the options are Monday, and then, because to me, 1.2 million is way too much. I think that's going to cripple the town.
And to quote, Logan did say that it was not truly a die on the sword for a number either. He wants to see what it would look like. That was his wording. So we will do our best to see what it looks like and make a little sweaty decisions on Monday.
Yep. So I think it's with that.
I would also like to say that for the Board of Ed budget, like we talked about, you know, all that money going to special ed, that is dictated by legal documents, what kids get for special ed. So you can't cut those services. So the only thing that you can cut is what your neurotypical general ed kids are getting. So you're going to have to cut those things like teachers or, you know, the specialist classes that aren't considered needed, like they're gonna be the ones losing out. So you think like, oh, have them cut more, but that really is going to affect your kids.
As a matter of fact, when I first got on the Board of Ed, and I'm looking at Liz, you'll appreciate this, you get elected, and 2 months later, you're in budget season. You know, welcome to your learning
I
curve.
came right when it started.
So what happened to me was, Bruce Brett Snyder sat down and presented all of his budget, and he's there going, so we have this student that moved to town, so we need this person, we need this person just moved to town, I need this service. And I looked at him and I said, did you just tell us we can't cut your budget? He goes, oh no, you always have the right to cut my budget, but you're still legally obligated to provide the service. Okay, has anybody noticed nobody works for free? It was like, I understood that message pretty clear. What do you think, Morris? Didn't take long. I think I'm a fast learner.
So, anybody else on the board have any other comments they want to offer tonight?
So you're gonna get it to us as soon as you can.
Yep. And Logan, you said you have a whole list. I would advise you to send them to our finance officer and town administrator. Probably this way they have them first thing Monday morning when they walk into the office.
Yep.
Okay, so at this point, I also.
Mr. Chairman, are
Yep.
we going to continue this meeting?
Yes.
On
this
Monday?
meeting-
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it'll be continued till Monday.
I offer the motion to continue this meeting on Monday night at 6 o'clock.
Yes.
Here again?
Yes.
Yep, here.
Oh, it's gonna be here?
Yep.
Right here.
Yep. Liz, did you second it? Is that what I heard?
What? Yeah, I second it.
Okay, so motion by Morris, seconded by Liz. Any discussion? Not all in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Motion carries.